Ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday evening, 7 p.m. Pacific, therefore it is time. It's time for the New World Order Race with Time show. And tonight, the hosts are the one and the only Crystal Clark, the lovely Mhairead, I think that's the way she, MacDonald over there in someplace. And here we go, folks, you're live.
Oh, thank you very much, Dave. This is a very special show, not just for the listeners, but for me also, because this is the first time I've been able to do a show with my dear friend and colleague, Mhairead MacDonald. So I think it will be a lot of fun. She's my new partner in crime for this evening, and we'll see how much trouble we can get in together, which I think will be fun. But I also, more importantly, do want to thank Mhairead for all of her hard work in bringing us our guests this evening. She was the one who found these people and brought them to us so that we could share them with you. So thank you so much for doing that, Mhairead. It means a lot. These people have a lot of really important information, and people really need to hear it. So we really appreciate you doing that for us.
You're very welcome, and I hope that people do take on board what they're saying and follow up with their websites and YouTubes and Facebook pages, which will give that information out later. But yeah, it's well worth listening to.
Yeah, so we actually had 3 guests planned for this evening. One of them is having some technical issues, and I hope that if that subsides, that she'll be able to join us later in the show. Her name is Christina Consolo. A lot of people know her as Rad Chick. She's an anti-nuclear activist and a mutation researcher. Her website is climateviewer.com. She's the host of Nuked Radio. You can find her on Facebook at Rad Chick Radiation Research and Mitigation. And her YouTube is Rad Chick Channel. We also have with us Kevin Blanch. He's an artist, an anti-nuclear activist, and a post-Fukushima AML Leukemia survivor. So thank you for being here with us, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Kevin's website is thepostignoranceproject.com. He also has a radio show called Post Ignorance Radio that airs on Tuesday and Thursdays at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on ucy.tv. You can find him on Facebook and YouTube under Kevin Blanch. And our third guest is Andrew Ebisu, although his last name is, did I get that right, Andrew?
Oh, that's a good rendering, yeah.
His last name is spelled Ebisu. He's a brilliant filmmaker and an anti-nuclear activist as well. You can find him on Facebook under On Fukushima Beach, which is the title of several of his really wonderful films, and you can find him on YouTube under Andrew Ebisu, Ebisu. So again, I want to thank you folks for being here, because it's always an honor and a pleasure to be in the company of kindred spirits. And when I say kindred spirits, what I mean is there are none of us on this show tonight that have any illusions about what's really happening. We all know that this is genocide, and we will all stand up and say so. And that, to me, is a very rare quality these days, but it's time. People really have to know what's happening. So, I know you guys have done this before, but we have a lot of new listeners, and that's important, because that's what this is all about, is getting more and more people to understand that this tragedy, this travesty that we call Fukushima is ongoing. There has been no effort to mitigate it. It's just not a good situation. So if you wouldn't mind, let's start with you, Kevin. Could you give us a brief history about how you came to be where you are today?
Well, I grew up here in Utah, and I still live out here on the edge of the lake. But anyway, when I was a boy, Utah was ground zero for the anti-nuclear fight via the 350 open-air test in Nevada. My father was a Special Forces Marine at Pendleton, drafted. And anyway, he had been one of the 40,000 Marines that were human guinea pigs in the Nevada test bed. I knew it. It was an incredible species, but, you know, growing up with him, Wallace Stegner was here. I don't know what you would call it as a child. You know, I look back on it, was it autism, what it was, whatever. I had this really, really advanced, developed side of my brain, and another part of my brain that was very underdeveloped. I had a lot of problems, but as a young guy, and as I started to grow, I started to try to understand what was going on with me, what was going on with him. Well, Wallace Stegner was here at the time. Edward Abbey was here at the time. Carol Gallagher, all the anti-nukers. And I started to get involved in that complex. And, of course, the anti-nuclear movement was big across the country. And then my father died of leukemia. And in perfectly good health. I mean, at the prime of his life, mowed down, and that's what really, really lit the fire. And so I really, really dove into it hardcore. And then right here behind my house is Westinghouse secret Moxie fuel plant is right behind my house out here. I used to get chased on our farm, on the family ranch. It's right here on the edge of the lake. And, I'm a desert rat out like, well, I was a kid, on our huge ranch, in and out of there, chased out of there with a helicopter all the time when I was a kid. So as time went on, I really dug in, and I just became an anti-nuclear. I started to understand that the death of my father, and my uncle was it was at the Pentagon at the time, my dad's younger brother, and he and we sued the Justice Department over and over and over to get all the film and the footage and the documentation that everybody watches on the atomic veterans now. It really it really pissed me off so bad that it was covered up, that they got no medals, the human guinea pig, their most fine. And my father was an incredible guy, an incredible physical species. My mother used to say he looked just like Elvis with muscles. But as I dug in, and then of course, Chernobyl, all of the whole complex, I just kept fighting back on it, fighting. The more I learned, the madder I got, the more angry. I was on Wall Street for a long time. I started to understand more and more. And then I was working on my PhD, doing some teaching at the university at Weber State. We were the number one school of business in the country at the time. Well, a few years ago, I was messing around with the YouTube site, working on my PhD, post-ignorance. I'm a socioeconomist. Fukushima happens. I go crazy on my YouTube site, blah, 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 blah. I've always understood that radiation, unarguably causes cancer, causes leukemia. It's unarguable. I dove into it in my PhD. Going crazy about Fukushima, it's going to give you cancer. Well, 7 months later, I got a stomachache, thought I had food poisoning. Ended up, a long story, misdiagnosed, but anyway, ended up with an incredible radical form of AML leukemia called the nouveau OS, which is leukemia that actually presents in the tumors, which, when that happens, the survival rate is extremely low. It's radical as it gets, and I went from 170 to 130. Ended up diagnosed myself, by the way, as all these doctors had it wrong, and then a family friend, I come from a family of doctors, got involved, and anyway, they finally bone marrow biopsy at the very last minute. I was in extremely critical condition. They'd sent me home to die, gave me 2 months to live, and ended up in the bone marrow transplant center at LDS Hospital, quarantined in there went through an incredible radical leukemia treatment, and going through that process, and people are able to watch along through my YouTube site, me fighting for my life, which to this day I still am fighting for my life. I'm so sick that I've come incredible miles, and just surviving the disease so far has, pushed me into my people need to know this about me too. I'm not just Fukushima. A lot of people say, oh, Kevin, what have you done to cure Fukushima? There is no cure for Fukushima. I'm an anti-nuclear hardcore and always have been. I hate the bastards. I go back to Hamlet, oh, cursed spite that I was ever born to set this right, and that's what my life has become. I hate the pricks. I want accountability for every one of them. They're evil, and so that's what I do every day. fight for my life and fight for everybody else's life and expose the lie of the greatest, evilest cartel in human history called nuclearism. By the way, I just got back from Tennessee, the Megan Rice trial. I was there, and I got to tell you, that was all my activism, everything I've ever done. By the way, I met her in Peru. That's where I met Megan Rice a long, long time ago, and I met her from a stripper in Vegas who was with men who I was involved with for a long time. Yeah. She's still around, by the way. She's in Russia. And, you know, we were protesting the Nevada test site a long, long time ago. A long time ago. So I've been at this a very, very long time. And I plan on doing it till I die.
Explain who Femin is for new listeners that may not know. Who is Femin?
Femin are the girls that they really got in vogue in the 90s. What happened is nobody was talking about Chernobyl. Femin was really launched via Chernobyl, but they're human rights activists. They're young, beautiful Russian females who says we need to get attention on causes, namely Chernobyl. So they take their shirts off and expose their breasts, and they typically write things across there. But they went into Chernobyl, took their shirts off, and exposed to the world, hey, to get attention, hey, idiots, you got cut. The Chernobyl was the greatest cover-up in human history. People are dying. Yeah, was. Now it's Fukushima. Now, incredible success. They told the world of Chernobyl, which they're still at it, and it's grown, but their activism, a lot of people, you know, sexist, whatever, oh no. They did what they had to do, and it worked. They told the story. I mean, they told the world of Chernobyl when it was being covered up. People know the story of Chernobyl that do know, which few know. Very few people know, but the people that do know it via Femin. And they're young, beautiful girls, because that's who nuclear fallout kills. It kills young, beautiful females. I have an obituary I carry around in my back pocket with me. 34-year-old that I was in the hospital with who recently just passed. Incredible girl. That's who it mows down in the prime of their lives. And they told the world about that. And not that it just kills acutely right after, but it kills forever. And it kills today, it will kill tomorrow, and it will kill tens of thousands of years from now still. That's what nuclear is. It's insanity by definition.
That's absolutely right, yeah. And, you know, women, I think, suffer a great deal more than men in the sense that once their thyroids are destroyed, so is their reproductive system. Those two things go together.
Well, the thing is about, a lot of people need to know this too. You'll see the orange logo and it says, fight like a girl. That's the leukemia logo. The reason that come about is because leukemia, AML leukemia, it's evil on everybody. I mean, it just mows you down. People don't realize it when you get it. I mean, I went from 170 to 130 in 3 weeks, but it affects girls harder, yet women out-survive men. And the reason women out-survive men is because women don't kill themselves. People like me, men, that do get through the incredible, radical, intense, hardcore treatment, because it wipes you out financially, it destroys your life, men kill themselves. And it's the number one killer of leukemia victims if you do survive things. Even if you get to the stage like I do, a tremendous amount of men commit suicide. Women don't commit suicide. They're tough. They fight, and they never give up. It's so rare for a girl to kill herself, especially when men do it all the time. You know, so that's where that logo came from. And like I said, at first the thyroid, yeah. We call it the Utah smiley face here. And I believe Carol Gallagher termed that, who's alive and well in Colorado. And, you know, they call it in Europe, they'll call it the Chernobyl necklace. Now, my scar I have from my central line in my jugular vein, a young man from Mississippi termed it. I used that term. He said one day, he says, Kevin, I'm going to term your scar the Fukushima fish hook. And I said, I like that. So that's what I call it. I call it my Fukushima fish hook. So it's a brutal, 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 hardcore disease and a brutal, brutal, hardcore treatment. And people think, oh, you can smoke a little weed, let's drink some meat, Jeremy. It's too late for all that stuff when you get the byproduct of nuclear fire. And we know for a fact, via the data of the 40,000 atomic veterans in the Nevada test site, via the data from Chernobyl, via all the data that's collected. People say it's not there. It is there. It's 100% right there. I have it all. I presented it over and over. Nuclear fallout is 100% correlated with AML leukemia, and among multiple other diseases. And
yes,
it
many.
kills you. Yeah. Any autoimmune disease, but that's the granddaddy. That's the Mac Daddy that kills you in a very acute, hardcore fashion.
Before we move on to Andrew, Dave was so great about playing that song for me, Radioactive. I heard that song and it really made me think of you, and I posted it on your Facebook page a couple of weeks ago, and you had a really neat story to tell. Would you mind sharing it?
Yeah, well, in fact, last time I was on you guys' show, I was protesting at the Imagine Dragon concert. I know the Imagine Dragon kids personally. They're Utah boys. That song was absolutely written, because we all know in Utah, we are the cancer capital of the world. It is Utah's dirty little secret. And anyway, those kids, I've been working with them for a long time, and I'm like, they're people that know my people, blah, 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 family. I'm like, drop a banner in one of your concerts. Drop a banner down that says Fukushima. Now, I don't know if it really happened, but the rumor is that they did it. So, I don't know. I wish they would get more active in. They're making so much money right now, but, they're central Utah boys. And anybody that lives in that neck of the wood knows. We all grew up in Utah, knowing what downwinders were. Cancer was on. And it seems like people here forgot. Well, plutonium didn't forget. Those kids get it. Oh, they get it. When they wrote that song, they know exactly, like so many of us here do. The rest of the world, we're in denial now in Utah because really, people will tell you, God's will. I always use Tim Shell out of Steinbeck, East of Eden, Almaist, but really, people are like, what can we do? What we can do? And I'm like, there's a lot of things you can do. Fight these bastards back. Shut down these nuclear cartel evil bastards. Keep your immune system full is the number one thing you can do. Fresh fruit and fresh vegetables. And not from a pill is the best thing you can do. Awareness is power. Knowledge is power. And the art of their music is power.
Yeah, knowledge absolutely is power, which is why so much work has went into keeping it from the rest of us. There's a very real war on knowledge, and I think that people are finally starting to get that. And so people are continually participating in their own demise out of ignorance and beginning to recognize that it was set up that way on purpose. So that's a very big change that I've seen, because it was a very hard sell to get people to understand that in the beginning, because all they would hear when you would say to a person, when I would say to a person, you're participating in your own demise out of ignorance, all they could hear was, I said they were ignorant. They couldn't understand that it was killing them and it was by design, and I'm not the one who did it to them. But people are snapping out of that, and that's really super important. And I was very impressed with this song because I wrote a book years ago that covered, this was pre-Fukushima, but it covered all of the other problems that we have, the vaccines, the GMOs, the chemtrails, weather modification, and we were already in really big trouble before Fukushima. Now that Fukushima has happened, it's not a good situation. And I remember writing in that book how much it disturbed me that these musicians, because they have millions and millions of followers, were not singing about things that really mattered. And I've seen a huge change in the last 5 years of more and more musicians, moving in that direction.
I'm an artist, and I've been painting in this genre for a very long time. If you watch my videos, you look in the backdrop, the painting that I have in the corner, I painted in 1994, which I call the nuclear triangle, the nuclear vagina, and it's Japan, Russia, United States. I've been painting in the nuclear meltdown and the nuclear contamination and the nuclear genocide genre. I painted in 1994. And so I've been there. Thomas Ackerman, who's a brilliant artist up in Canada, incredible, brilliant art, fled the Mediterranean. I fled an incredible art career. I mean, one of the most famous artists in Europe. He's in Canada, and that's all he does is paint in this genre. And he was doing it pre-Fukushima. I was doing it way before Fukushima. So we're there. It's just we haven't had a platform, you know. And as far as the music goes, I mean, we all know what corporations of the corporate music scene has done to music. There's no organic. So I've always said that I think there's plenty of artists out there doing what they do. The problem is the people who recognize the art, who promote the art. That's the problem. We don't have them. So we have to promote ourselves in an organic way. That's what my YouTube site's about. That's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to create awareness through art. And YouTube's a powerful, powerful genre. And, you know, I ran and raved about Fukushima, went crazy the day that it happened, and I've never quit, with incredible accuracy. That's what artists do. Artists recognize the reality and they present it in a way that burns through a person's soul without, you know.
Yeah, burns through their
so they understand.
Snuggie. Yeah.
That's it. I call it their dogma snuggies. That's my
right.
term. People need to come out of their dogma snuggies, and everybody's got one.
Yeah. Yes, we do. So Andrew, so I would like to pose the same question to you. How is it that you came to be producing these really wonderful films? And I have to tell you that I've listened to your fourth. I've watched your fourth movie 4 times. Okay. And the combination at the end, the images and the music, it brings me to tears every time I listen to it. It's so beautiful. You did such a wonderful job. So how is it that you came to be where you are today?
I came out of pretty much, well, compared to Kevin, out of complete ignorance. You know, I had no idea what was going on with nuclear plants. I grew up, you know, we taught about nuclear weapons, and that was always terrible. But I mean, nuclear power just it didn't have that same menace that I understand today. But I just, perhaps about 4 years ago, I saw a guy on YouTube talking about the economic collapse. So that all made sense. But when Fukushima happened, I met people online, or watched people online like Kevin and Miss Milky the Clown and Christina, and it's like, oh gee, well, this is terrible. What's going on? So I'm pretty much born out of their crusades, or their products, basically. So from there on, I thought, oh, you know, someone has to make a movie at some stage, and I thought, oh, I might as well do one. And I didn't have any of the financial resources, or didn't know how to make a movie. So, as Kevin said, YouTube is he calls it a powerhouse genre. So, I pretty much plunder YouTube and use my own footage as well, just to create a collage of experiences and just put them in a narrative or story that tells what's really going on. So because YouTube it's like for good or for bad, it's a collective like history of people's shared experiences, and from that richness you can derive all kinds of media and films that you want to make, because there's someone in Israel, there's someone on the USS Reagan who's done some footage, there's someone in Malaysia should you need it. So really it's just it's my own arrangement of these other shared experiences, basically. If that answers your question.
Well, you're very gifted at that arrangement, I have to say, and I think that you're equally as beneficial to the movement as Kevin is, because you seem to instinctively know how to arrange it to make it easy to assimilate, and also, again, do it in ways that really penetrate the dogma snuggie that people are in. You really have done such an excellent job. Now, On Fukushima Beach is the main title of most of your films. They do have subtitles, But
Yep.
I would like for you to tell the story of where that came from, because it's an homage to another film that's very interesting.
Yeah, sure. You probably all know it. It's a film called On the Beach, made in 1959, and I knew about this film since I was a child because my parents bought this pictorial encyclopedia of great Hollywood movies, and I read about it. I thought, gosh, that's a depressing topic, and will that ever happen? So when Fukushima happened, it seemed like a complete tie-in, and being from Melbourne, where the film is made, it seemed like a marriage made in heaven. Like just it's some circumstances seem to sort of meld together perfectly because I live in Melbourne, and what has Melbourne got to do with Fukushima? But when you think about On the Beach, well, yeah, it's almost the same situation, except that there hasn't been a thermonuclear war. Well, the fallout tests were terrible enough, but On the Beach is after a thermonuclear exchange between the great powers. So it was a perfect tie-in, and On the Beach is perfectly relevant to and tied together with on Fukushima Beach. I would have hoped. So yeah, that's an amazing tie-in, you could say. Yeah.
Yes, it's like the stars lined up for you. Yes, it's very perfect.
Yeah. By the way, Andrew, I want to say hi, and I got to tell you, you know how much I love those films. They're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. I love your work, and I mean, I remember when I saw the very first one I put it up, and I remember telling you the first thing I said was, if I ever get back to teaching again, my students are going to have to view those things, I'll guarantee you. And they're as well done as any documentary I've ever seen. I mean, they're well researched, and like I said, the art of them, they're perfectly choreographed. I don't know if you've all probably seen The Battle for Chernobyl, which is, I think, could be one of the greatest documentaries ever made. I think Andrew's On the Beaches are every bit as important as that documentary. I think that's how important those documentary pieces that he's made. And anybody wants to learn quickly about Fukushima that's new to it, simply watch those On the Beach. You'll learn, and you'll learn quickly, easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. It was an honor to sort of channel all of your energy and your knowledge into that film. I'm very happy you liked them, and being a layman, making them as a layman, as a lay person, I think that was actually an advantage because each movie it's basically me trying to understand what's going on, being told by Kevin and Miss Milky and Christina. So as a layman, it's trying to understand it. That's sort of how the movie progresses, and that's a journey that I want all lay persons, of nuclears to experience, and that's why I thought it was an advantage to be completely new to the whole thing in making them, and it made it better for everyone's learning experience, you could say. Yeah.
I think you were also able to bring your perspective about Japan as well, Andrew, which is really important. I can't remember which film it was, but it's the bombing of Kyoto, I think, is the one where you bring in the whole historical perspective, the cultural, everything that's going on, because we're not guessing, well, we're hardly getting any kind of information directly out of, unless you know someone in Japan, and even then, it's difficult for people to understand, how that's happening within Japan.
My 3/11/11 symposium, if everything works out right, speaking of Japan and the whole nuclear triangle and the history, is going to be at the Enola Gay hangar, inside the hangar. Wow. Which is, it'll make a great historical angle there. It's right out here. It's right out here on the Utah-Nevada border, and I'm friends with the curator. They don't let anybody in there, and he's given me permission, so I think it'll be a great piece. Hopefully I'll get some good footage, and maybe you can use it in your next movie, Andrew.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah,
B-29 and all, yeah.
That would be awesome. I have to say, Andrew, that, you mentioned a moment ago that you think a lot of people are familiar with the film On the Beach, but we have a lot of younger generations. I mean, I'm 41 and I've never heard of it. So I was really educated through your films that way.
It's based on a book. It's based on a book by Neville Shute.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a great book, by the way. It really is great.
Yeah. It had almost an all-star cast. It's really fantastic. There was something that you hinted at that was in the film, in one of your own films, and it was this banner. And just to go into it a little bit deeper, so On the Beach is a post-apocalyptic film after there has been a massive nuclear exchange in the northern hemisphere and everybody is migrating south to get out of the way. Do I have that right?
That's correct, yes. Oh, you just an aside, they don't mention South Africa or anything like that, but everyone seems to be moving to South Australia. Yeah.
To Australia. There was a banner that you put in the film that said, "There's still time, brother," and I would like for you to explain why that's so powerful.
Yeah, actually, I have to make a bit of a confession. I haven't actually seen the movie from start to finish, but it was really put up there to keep people's spirits up. Actually, have any of you seen the movie from start to finish? I've tried to complete one.
No.
It was just to keep people's spirits up, and in the end, they were everyone had suicide pills when the final fallout came, to sort of do away with themselves and their families. So I guess it was a countdown to that final act of taking their suicide pills. I don't know what they call exactly, but time eventually ran out for people. And I guess the scary thing about the movie is, like, as I said in the film, that these people knew that they were doomed already. It was not. There was no way out, really. They knew they were going to die.
They didn't have dogma snuggies on.
Yeah, yeah, it was too late. But the thing about Fukushima and us is we, I don't know, I don't think we're doomed yet. But what's my point? But we're not, stung into action like we should be.
Yes, we're definitely moving in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, so before we get right into the meat of this, there's something I want to read, and it was really interesting. Like I said, I've watched that film quite a few times, but there was something I didn't catch until last night when I was watching it again, and it was interesting because I found this video about a week ago called Agenda 21, the Depopulation Agenda for a New World Order. And I want to compare, there was an Australian politician, her name is Anne Bressington, in this film, and I want to compare what she said to this quote that you included in the film, because I have found over the years that one of the most difficult things to express to a person is that this is being done on purpose. This is genocide, it's purposeful. And almost invariably, the first person, the question you're trying to explain this to, that comes out of their mouth is, why would they do that? And I think that more and more people are beginning to understand that we're not speculating why they would do that. All you have to do is read what has come out of their own mouths and their own think tanks and their own papers and their own missives. They're telling you why they're doing it. So there's no guesswork involved here. So I want to read this for a moment and compare what was in your film with what was in this video. So this quote comes from your second film, The Lights of Fukushima. The present vast overpopulation, now far beyond the world carrying capacity, cannot be answered by future reductions in the birth rate due to contraception, sterilization, and abortion, but must be met by the reduction of numbers presently existing. This must be done by whatever means necessary, and you quoted the source as the initiative for the UN Eco Summit in 1992. So what I'm going to read from you now comes from this video, the Agenda 21, the depopulation agenda for a new world order. And my blog is drowninginabsurdity.wordpress.com, and this article is there in its entirety with the film. And I really encourage people to watch it. It does not cover Fukushima, but it covers the mindset responsible for Fukushima. At the 1 hour, 3 minute, and 55-second mark, the Australian politician Anne Bressington begins to explain the 1968 origins of Agenda 21 via the Club of Rome, a think tank tasked with a crisis that would unite the world and condition us to accept global, which is New World Order, solutions to local problems. She goes on to explain the following. In 1997, Mikhail Gorbachev, also a member of the Club of Rome, said, "We are moving toward a new world order, the world of communism, and we shall never turn off that road. The environmental crisis will be the international disaster that will unlock the new world order, one world government." She further outlined it was during the 1992 Earth Summit that a document known as the Earth Charter was produced. This document was co-written by Maurice Strong, Club of Rome, and an ex-Nazi. His name is actually Maurice Goldberg. He came here and changed his name. So this was co-written by Maurice Strong and Mikhail Gorbachev. And both stated it was hoped this document would be adopted as the new 10 Commandments, with environmentalism as the new one world religion. She later quotes Ted Turner, Club of Rome, also an outspoken advocate of depopulation, echoing the same sentiments on the Georgia Guidestones, encouraging a 95% reduction in global population. Of additional importance, those adequately familiar with James Horak's work will recall him discussing once having a copy of a National Geographic magazine providing an expose on Chernobyl, which included the admission that Gorbachev was not only instrumental in causing the Chernobyl disaster, but was in fact personally responsible for intentionally ordering it. Although this documentary does not include global nuclear radiation contamination as another means to depopulate, it absolutely is, and the same mindset is once again prevailing where the current and unmitigated Fukushima nuclear disaster is concerned. So this is from their own lips, from their own mouths, from their own papers. So we aren't guessing when we say this is about genocide, purposeful genocide, and depopulation. They have told the world this is what they want repeatedly. So people really kind of need to get their head around that.
Well, the thing that people really, really need to understand is our post-fukushima. We know who the science and technology had. That's why I protested at Livermore Lab on death and Thanksgiving. Is John Holdren. He's the head of the science and technology team, and the Washington Post reporter, their propaganda machine leaked it. I reported it on September 26th, that he was handed the keys to run the cleanup of Fukushima. Well, check out John Holdren. He's the guy who made the bet, which he was dead wrong, in 1980 about depopulation, about pressure on commodity pricing, how it was going to send commodity pricing through the roof. By the way, which he was wrong. He's been wrong about everything he said. That's the guy who's been running the cleanup of Fukushima. He's written several books on depopulation. So
that's right.
There you go.
That's right.
That's proof that what they're, now, did they cause it? I don't know, but, I equated 3/11 exactly the counter option of 9/11, and boy, do they use it.
Well, here's the interesting thing, and I apologize in advance for asking you to do this, but we have to remember that there are a lot of new people plugging in because they understand that there's something very, very wrong here, and they're looking for answers. And while they can try to go back through 3 years of history and try to understand what's happened, because the war on knowledge is very, very real, and there is so much propaganda, without some guidance, I think they will emerge from that search probably schizophrenic because it's just so out of control. So I would like very much to start at the beginning of what happened, and not just what happened, but also what we were told happened versus what really happened, so that people can learn to separate the two. And of course, the very beginning of this story is the tsunami. And in the beginning, there were people that were very rightfully looking in the direction of HAARP. But there was a seismograph recording that was published from that moment that shows a very different signature between an earthquake and an explosion in terms of the way the energy builds and the way it releases. So it was not a HAARP-caused earthquake. There was some type of an explosion, and also it was supposed to be a 9 or 9.5 earthquake, but the buildings weren't shaking. So it clearly was not an earthquake. And then you have the Stuxnet issue involved in that. So even before we get to what happened at these at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, there's already something fishy going on, and it's the same MO. It's false flag, false flag, false flag. So I just read to folks, this is the mentality, this is where they're coming from, and this is why they would do this kind of thing. So I would like for you, both of you, so aside from that, okay, so there's a tsunami. We can disregard how it happened, but it happened. How many reactors did the Fukushima Daiichi plant have? How many reactors were damaged on the first day? So I don't know which one of you would like to take that, or if you both would like to comment on it.
I went crazy the day that it happened. Now, when it happened, we know as anti-nukers all over the world that, and this is a General Electric Mach 2s, I did multiple interviews for years saying that if we're going to get a nuclear meltdown, because I've been predicting one for years and years and years, that, you know, Fukushima, Japan, Diablo Canyon, California, San Onofre, California are the most vulnerable in the world. We knew that the industry themselves will tell you they can handle about a 7.8 earthquake. I saw that it was a 9. I knew immediately that they were in full core meltdown. So I went crazy on my YouTube site, says, oh my God, we've had a nuclear meltdown, and I says, watch them. Watch the way they'll play. They'll completely spin it. They'll spin it. Watch. They'll water it down, which I called it to exact T. They went right out of the Chernobyl playbook and lied. The greatest experts in the world. The media was heavily reported, but no one reported this as even one single meltdown. Not one single person reported it as a one single full blown out meltdown until 7 months after. I reported it was a meltdown the day. So people says, oh, the tsunami washed out the generators. In my YouTube site, Ani Gundershield was in there arguing with me. Busby was in there arguing with me the first few days. I had to kick them off the sites because they were, all this hydrogen blast. There were, on the shake, the cores fractured immediately in three reactors immediately. And so they were in full core meltdown before the tsunami hit. The spent fuel pools in number 4 went dry. They cracked, which I reported on day 3, long before any FOIA document was out. Spilled all over the floor. So we had immediately day 1, there were 3 full core meltdowns, which had never happened in the history of humanity. When Chernobyl happened, Chernobyl blew up. Now, Gorbachev is evil and whatever they want. They'd sent in 580,000 men, the greatest construction project in human history. Entombed Chernobyl, went in and got to the core. So, did it go into what we call China syndrome, which is nuclear fission? No, it did not not in an acute level at Chernobyl. It did at Fukushima, Japan. It's in full blown out China syndrome to this day and will be forever. There's no answer. And it happened immediately. Now, since then, the media, the John Goffman 1090 rule, he talked about this. This is how they feed you. Give you 10% of the truth until, it's just taken us 3 years and now people are getting away. It really blows my mind how people want California now. It's so acute.
Well, let's make sure that we're making this really simple for people, because there's just so much misinformation out there. So how many reactors did it originally house? Do you know?
6.
Is it 6? Okay.
3 were active. 4 is a giant spent fuel pool reactor that was in cold shutdown. 5 and 6 were supposedly in cold shutdown, which Cold shutdown means, yeah, they got all the spent fuel in there, I think, but they're not actually working. So there's 6. 3 that were operational, 1 that was a complete moxied fuel, number 4, which is just a big storage unit for nuclear weapon waste, and 5 and 6 were in cold shutdown, which means the stored fuel was there and the reactor was not fueled at the time. So there's 3 full core meltdowns that went immediately into China Syndrome. 1, 2, and 3. They blew up. They blew up and caught on fire and went into nuclear fission. 4 had what we call day 1, immediately when the quakes, immediately. Okay. And no one reported that. You know, it wasn't reported. It took freaking a year for that to get out of it. But they blew up, all 3 of them, in full blown out core meltdown, on fire, so hot that nothing can ever get near them. And number 4, a lot of people don't know this around the country and around the world, that we have the spent fuel. There's no answer for nuclear waste. No answer.
That's right. We just move it around. We can't actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So spent fuel 4 has these huge, giant spent fuel pools. Spent fuel pools look like swimming pools, and cranes pick up the fuel when it's done, and they put it in these pools and they just build it because they have to stay cool. They have to have water on them all the time, and if water goes off them, they go into nuclear fission. Well, the spent fuel pools cracked at number 4 on the shake immediately and spilled onto the floor. So when it was exposed that number 3 and number 4 had moxied fuel, which is a process we use to make nuclear weapons and even make it stronger. Now 5 and 6 just had stuff sitting on the shelves in the spent fuel pools in the cold. Well, since this July, and this October of 2013, we had minor earthquakes over there, and the word that I get is that they were unloading fuel in 5 and 6, why everybody had their eye on the shiny ball on 4, and they had small accidents, which aren't small, in 5 and 6. So I report now that all 6 are in meltdown. Jeez. So we have China Syndrome going, nuclear fission in all 6 reactors, which we know that that's a fact, and there's no answer.
Okay, let's. I found whether I prefer it or not, it works better if when you're trying to help people understand the progression of something, that you go in sequence so they can go from A to B to C, because it's really hard to get people to go from A to F and skip the steps in between. Yeah. They just can't put it together, and that's okay. We'll try to help them do that. So 3 and 4 had MOX fuel, is that right?
Yes.
And those were the only 2 that have
that we know of.
That we know of. Okay.
Well, we know of tremendous amounts of MOX fuel in 3 and 4. Now, we know these factually. Now, is it possible that there's MOX fuel in 5 and 6, 1 and 2? Yeah. But we know factually that there's in 3 and 4, yes.
Okay. Can you explain why that's so much worse?
Well, what it is, Moxie, which they do right out here behind my house in their secret little freaking plant, and that's why I just got back from Y-12 in Kentucky, is what they do is they take nuclear waste. That's the only reason nuclear plants exist. The only reason is to make nuclear weapons.
Oh, and
they
to take nuclear.
Yeah, the filthiest, dirtiest stuff in the world, the uranium mines. But they take nuclear waste and they use a process with an oxygen oxide process that it's a fire that they create, that it makes the fuel. It enriches the uranium, and it makes the fuel literally thousands of times stronger, and stronger and stronger and stronger to build nuclear weapons out of. Well, they have to store that. They store it. Now, why would Japan have nuclear weapon storage waste? Japan doesn't have nuclear weapons. Well, it just exposes that the United States is Japan, and the United States, Fukushima, and the cover-up of Fukushima truly is rooted in the trying to cover up the fact that there is nuclear weapons-grade waste in 3 and 4. And it proves and it exposes.
Yeah. That's the really important thing. It's weapons grade. This is not what these reactors were designed for. Isn't that right?
That's right, and that's the only reason that the cover-up has existed is it's I mean, that is where the cover-up started off in the ruse, and this is coming right from Gregory Jackal, head of the RNC's mouth. You know, there were people in Japan. Believe it, Kevin Camps from Beyond Nuclear was in Japan 3 months before at Fukushima, reporting that there's a secret CIA nuclear weapons facility at Biachi, Fukushima, Japan. And we as anti-nuclears were all ranting and raving about it. Look, they're freaking moxie and fuel at Fukushima in Japan. We were going off about it, you know, many of us, for years about this. And, you know, they're building a secret nuclear weapons base all across Japan, pointing at China. And now it's been exposed that we were absolutely right, that sure enough, that's what they were up to over there.
That's very important, and we shouldn't overlook the fact that on both 9/11 and prior to prior to 3/11, Israeli security forces were brought in at both locations. So we have to look at that, because a lot of people don't really understand what Zionism is and how this is driving so much of this. So that's really important. So we're dealing with a group of elitists that are the most racist people on the planet. This is where the Gaza ghetto came from. They're very sick people, and they have infiltrated our government here in this country, which is why we have so many American/Israeli dual citizens in Congress, and most of these people are the same people that want our guns. So there's a mindset at work here that is absolutely, completely antithetical to the life of billions of people on this planet, and we have to keep that in mind. So we've covered what reactors were damaged, which ones had MOX fuel, and then I also want to go back to why reactor 4 is so important, because it wasn't just the MOX fuel, there was something else involved. Okay, so with the number of reactors that melted down, now I know this is going to sound super remedial, but we really need people to really understand what we're saying. What is a meltdown, Kevin? What is that?
What a meltdown is what a nuclear reactor is. It's a little concrete core, and it has these rods in it with uranium rods in it that have been enriched, and it's an incredible, crazy process that goes in there. What happens basically is that core fractures, and when they fracture and they meet the air, the atmosphere, they melt together. And it's just exactly what it says. It's a meltdown. So they melt into each other, and there's no turning it off. It is a heat process. It's nuclear fission, not fusion, nuclear fission. And we don't even know what it creates, because it's never happened in the history of humanity. And so they melt together. That's why we've always been feared them so much. We feared them. And, you know, they release gamma rays. Now, I've named it plutonium. I think it's funny and laugh.
That's great.
You know,
It is, yeah.
Because plutonium, of course, man-made, these elements that we know that are let off by nuclear thermal blasts and different blasts. But what is the byproduct? And anybody who tells you they know the byproduct of a nuclear meltdown is a liar, because it's never happened. The greatest minds in the world hypothesize. And they've been put in, you know, different tests that, as far as we can go, you know, we've tested the Bikini Atoll bomb, the open air test, and that of Hiroshima, Nagasaki. But an actual, true meltdown, now Chernobyl blew up. You know, and they got at it. Kind of a meltdown. Was sort of a meltdown. I guess it was a meltdown, but this is a real meltdown, multiple ones, and we don't know. But we know that the gamma rays are released instead of just alpha rays, and atmospheric fission. Well, I think it's absolutely no doubt that it's happening. So we don't even know. We don't even know the energy sources, but it's been hypothesized that the corium will burn down into the earth. Thus, that's where the word China syndrome came from. You know, which I've named this the South American syndrome, to burn all the way through the earth. Now, that's what's going on. Now, factually, in detail, do we know? No, nobody knows, but we know through the bombs, we know through Chernobyl, we know through Einstein's work, we know through the Manhattan Project, we know from the work that's going out at Y-12, that goes out here. We know from every scientist who's ever experimented with it that it is a power unleashed, unknown to man, that of epic, epic, epic proportions. And that's exactly what's going on. That's what a meltdown is. So we're going to find out, you know. Well, the genocide's the perfect word. The Pacific genocide, well, I termed it a long time ago, and it's a killer. We know that.
Yeah, it absolutely is a killer. Did you want to add something to that, Mhairead?
No.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I thought I cut you off in the middle of trying to say something. Okay.
No, it's okay. There was something I was thinking about, though, when, in terms of confusion with stories and things like that. I know that something I read that said that Core 2 of Fukushima had been completely lost because it was blown out to avoid explosion. Would you agree with that, Kevin, or do you think it's just speculation that they would have done that?
Yeah, I think that's speculation. I think that 1 and 2 are in exactly the same scenario as each other, and they're corium burning deeper and deeper into the earth. But, you know, people get caught up in the corium going deeper and deeper into the earth. I call it the red sun. And the red sun, what I call it is, it's a ball of energy being released up, down. Now, people need to, this is very, very important. People need to, and this is very simple. In the early days, when it blew up, the wind was blowing out over the Pacific Ocean for the first 6 days. Now, CNN and everybody was over there. The wind was blowing out. So it was North America that was being hammered, not Tokyo. Now, the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Committee, Gregory Jackal, who since resigned, head of it, they recommended the evacuation of Tokyo. That is a fact. Now, it blew out over the top of the North America, and we got hammered with it the first 5 days. And where it rained, it really, and we know, and the government's finally admitted that the ratings were astronomical across North America, and they raised limits. But what the IAEA, the powers there be, over this accident, they made the decision to dump water on it. And all water does, and this is what they've done the entire time. They dump water on top of these things, so the water knocks down the so-called steam blast, which is a nuclear meltdown blast, which Gundershield argues all the time, hydrogen blast. There's nothing hydrogen about it. Anyway, they dump water on it and then push it into the Pacific Ocean, which I started reporting that on April 3rd, 2011, in exact detail. They were pushing plutonium into the Pacific Ocean, which has been verified. I was the only one that reported that for months and months and months. So instead of the plume going up into the air and catching into the jet stream, which happened the first 6 days, they made the decision not to have that happen, to push it into the Pacific Ocean. So for 1,040-something days, Fukushima's energy that is being released, these epic gamma rays, has been pushed into the Pacific Ocean. Now, there's other so-called low-level steam and hydrogen that off the water that does get up into the atmosphere and hits this, but not in the acute, hardcore fashion that is the Pacific Ocean is taking the brunt of this. Well, it doesn't matter. It's in the air of the steam because it's all connected. This ecosystem's all connected. That's what's going on.
That's right. And there are people here in the United States reporting radioactive snow in the Midwest and on the East Coast. So they're definitely spreading it, which is not a good thing. But before we go back to Reactor 4 and why that was so bad, I want to shift back to Andrew, because you have this really wonderful this part of your film that talked about the USS Nimitz and the Reagan. Oh, yeah. And I thought it was interesting that you referenced the Nimitz, even though that wasn't the ship that inevitably tried to offer assistance. My brother was on the Nimitz. He was stationed on the Nimitz during the first Gulf War. He's a bit older than I am, so he retired from the Navy. But it's really important that people understand. All of us are just normal people. You know, we're not geniuses, but we care enough to do what we can, and that means that we are examples for others. Like you said, Andrew, you didn't have any knowledge of how to make films, but you made them and you did it beautifully because you really care, and anybody is capable of helping, and we really need them to start doing that. But can you tell me more about the USS Ronald Reagan and what happened to those people when they were told to respond.
Yeah, well, it's actually the USS Ronald Reagan. They call it a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. So they're really the USS Nimitz, of course, as you say. They all, it was a prototype. Prototype's not the right word, but they're all modeled after the USS Nimitz.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has a connection. People serve in the military to obviously help their country, and they want to help people in distress. So I think that's the overriding motivation for people in the military. Some people want adventure and whatnot, but these people want to help people in danger, and so they were stationed. Well, in the documentary it says they were scheduled to dock in South Korea for a port call, and something got called to diverted to Fukushima to help. And they didn't know there was a nuclear accident occurring. It was just an earthquake humanitarian effort basically, and so they went there and were ferrying supplies into the affected areas, and they were stationed there for about a month and a half, just going, delivering supplies, and they were stationed, according to their attorney, like 2 or 3 football fields from the Fukushima plant. That's an eerie image to put in your head, but right in front of the what Kevin was describing, the meltdowns into the ocean, into the air. And they were using the seawater. They desalinated, and all the personnel were bathing in it, cooking in it, using it for whatnot. So the lawsuit is going to be more than 50 or 70 people, I think, eventually, because they're all suffering these symptoms. It's a very panoply of health effects, like diarrhea and bronchitis, all kinds of things. One sailor's in a wheelchair and unable to, he has to urinate via a catheter or something like that, and it's quite horrific. Yeah. So they were called in to mitigate a disaster that they didn't understand the scope of. There's actually a nuclear disaster as well. So that's basically what happened there. And it's amazing how quickly they got there from Korea, and they steamed to Japan like a day after. And someone, there was an interviewer who asked one of the sailors, I think it was Mike Seaborn, or one of the sailors was asked why were they stationed just off Fukushima? And he said he didn't really know why. It is a big question mark, of all the places you could dock or just lay anchor, right outside the Fukushima plant. It's a very contentious question. If that answers your environment. So was there something else you wanted to know?
Oh, I'm sorry. So are you saying that this particular ship was docked at Fukushima before the accident?
No, it was headed to South Korea, but it was once they learned about the earthquake, it was diverted to. According to their attorney, it laid anchor to assist the disaster affected areas. It lay anchor about 2 or 3 football fields from the Fukushima plant. So they were just right on it, like in a perfect position
to be more guinea pigs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a monstrous thing to.
One of the kids who has leukemia from USS Reagan in the hospital with me at LDS. And I was in San Diego all summer long with the lawsuit as it was going on. I was reporting it live from San Diego. I was down there all summer with them. I met with the Navy, went to the thing, and they're pissed. And, they got thrown out of character. I have the transcript, by the way, which an activist paid a lot of money for. They had me $75 a page It's what they were nailing people for. I have it. I have the entire transcript from that trial, and it was behind closed doors. And, you know, they sent 8 ships in there, by the way, originally. 8 ships. And they human guinea pig them. And I'll tell you how evil they are. The USS Reagan this fall had a Little League football camp on top of it. And it was right there. That picture you see where they're shooting the water, that's the USS Reagan. That's how much contamination it got. And I mean, you think you can just do a scrub down like they did and it just decontaminates? Oh no. And I mean, the contamination's on that ship forever. And it's outrageous what they did. And the Navy and the Marines, I'm head of the Atomic Veterans, by the way, and they've had it. I mean, there's a huge fight going on inside the Navy and the Marines, and was from day one inside the Situation Room. They wanted the keys to Fukushima immediately, and they got overrode. And that's why Gregory Jacko resigned. So the USS Reagan and these ships that went in, it's such a huge that I think it probably will be the component to this that breaks the back of the government and exposes it. These lawsuits, and they got a good attorney, by the way. I've talked to him, I've met with him, and down there, and he's relentless on this. And it's going to be the piece that fractures within inside the Navy and within inside the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps had it, and there's a really, you know, and you probably know this. A lot of your viewers probably don't know this, and this all ties together. This is very, very important in this. When the virus got exposed, that it was Israel and the United States orchestrating killing the Iranian scientists, you know, breaking down, and Holdren come out and says, when we find out who did that, we are going to punish them to the letter of the law. They're going to Bradley Manning him on by 10 times.
Yeah, lying bastard. Yeah.
Yeah. We seen who came forward, didn't we? Do you see who the whistleblower was? The Joint Chief of Staff, the 5-star Marine. And I'll tell you why. Here's why. I'm head of the Atomic Veterans. The Marines have had it with the nuclear industry killing their men. 40,000 Marines, including my father, human guinea pig, cut their tonsils out. You know, I mean, just gave them LSD right there in the desert. Well, they did it again in Fallujah. These white phosphorus on their own men. The Marines have had it. The Navy has had it. But it just shows you the power of the nuclear industry. When you think about it, the nuclear industry can override the United States Navy and the United States Marine. And how much power is that? So there's a fight going on inside there, and we need the Navy and the Marines who are fighting back and getting their own men being human guinea pigs and killed on the USS Reagan. Well, all these, we need to support those people. We need to, you know, we need to give them political cover. That, hey, if you want a whistleblower and you want to talk, I've got your back.
That's
the American public needs to get those people's backs.
That's
because
right.
they know and they want to talk. They want to talk.
Yeah. The American people need to know that these people have a story they need to hear, which is very important. And I don't know about you, but I am really sick of these people being behind all of it and pretending like it's someone else. You know, when we find out who did it, that's a joke. They did it together. You know, it's really, really sad. So going back to what you said about they wanted the keys. Now I'm assuming they wanted the keys because they wanted to
entomb it.
Yeah, they wanted to stop it.
Now look, here's how this played out in the early days. When I was reporting this in detail, Gregory Jacko, which ties right to where you guys are at. This all ties to Yucca Mountain. Okay, Harry Reid is the second most powerful man in the political arena. You know, we know that they're all puppets to the whoever. But anyway, he's right here behind my house. The ATK plant is out here by the lake. We know what happened in 1986. Harry Reid worked there when the rocket booster blew up on the Challenger. So the debate has gone like this. Harry Reid grew up at Yucca Mountain. That's where he was born and raised. Okay, we built Yucca. Now, people that don't know what Yucca Mountain is the National Depository for Nuclear Waste that part of the deal in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s when they built all these nuclear reactors, there was no answer for the waste. Part of the deal was that nuclear waste was going to Yucca Mountain, Nevada in this cave. They built it. It's there. Las Vegas grew up. Harry Reid's a powerful man. He's the senator. He doesn't want it. His contingency doesn't want it there. So the argument's gone. So he placed Gregory Jacko, head of the Nuclear Regulatory Committee. Harry Reid placed him there to simply block Yucca Mountain. Okay, he had no clue that Fukushima was going to happen. Fukushima happened. He was called to the Situation Room. He's head of the Nuclear Regulatory Committee. In that room, it's been exposed now. I hypothesize what went on in that room. But Gregory Jacko comes out. The media's all over. You can see he's aghast. He's called to the Hill. This is just days after Fukushima. You know, it's televised. People are all over. Cameras are all over. He takes the fifth. He won't answer anything. Well, inside that room, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they're in there. Eric Holden, the head of the Obama Science and Technology team from the Livermore Lab in Berkeley are all in there.
Yeah, the depopulation expert is in there. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the head of he's head of Science and Technology, Obama's team. That's him. He runs it.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was before this happened. But anyway, so the fight was inside there, how they're going to do this. Now, the Navy is the only ones on the face of the earth, are the Russian Navy and military and the American military that have the technology, that have worked and prepped to handle a nuclear meltdown. God forbid we ever have one. They've got ships, they've got all kinds of equipment. That's all they do. Now, it was reported, including CNN, and it's out there, and I have it. The CNN reported that the nuclear meltdown ship, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, was sent to Japan, was on its way, and then boom, turned around. So we take from that, what happened inside the Situation Room was they wanted the keys. The Army, and we know that. The Navy and the Marines wanted to go in. Well, if they went in and entombed that, that's the end of the nuclear cartel. When Fukushima happened, part of me was actually happy because I'm like, they just got their back broke. They're done. And, so they knew that, so they wouldn't let them in. So the Livermore Lab in Berkeley, California, at the University of Berkeley and out at Livermore, which, I mean, that place is beyond creepy out there. I protested out there this year on my project. They have claimed for years, they get funded billions and billions of dollars, that monster. They claim that they have the technology to clean a meltdown down. They have nanotechnology, they have cold fusion. So Obama was like, okay, go for it. You got it. Go do it. So they've been over there the whole time. Well, in October of this year, 2013, the head of cold fusion at the Lawrence Livermore Lab in Livermore, California, resigned. I'm like, oh my God. And then I read his statement. And he said, he said that we need to pivot off of this massive funding we're getting for cold fusion. We need to go a different direction. I'm like, and it just glared to me, what they're doing over there is not working. And then and this is the irony, this is a crazy story, but I was asked to join with Anonymous at the Billion Masked Man March. They've been asking me to do it. Finally, I agreed to do it, which, by the way, was the best thing I ever did, because Anonymous had no clue about Fukushima. Oh, did I awake a sleeping giant. I went
Thank you
to
for
D.C.
doing that. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, boy. When I was there, so I led that. And by the way, RT voted that as the number 4 most underreported story in all the world, me leading the Million Masked Man, me and John Fairhurst. It was massive, by the way. You wouldn't believe how many people were there. Why I'm there, I get an email, and it says, Kevin, you ain't going to believe this. Obama has sent Ernest Monsi to Fukushima. He's over there, and he's released a statement. RT reported it. Here, that they were summoned to the White House on November 4th. So I said, get me over to the people I'm staying with. Drive me over to the Department of Energy. I need to get in the Department of Energy on November 4th. I want to be there when they get there. So I'm over there at the Department of Energy. I get in there. I shot a little video. I'm there exact time. And the guy says, no, they're going to go to the White House. Like, and the Department of Energy is only 1 block. So I hurry and walk over, and RT's going to interview me and John Furr. So there I'm standing, waiting for my interview. RT's interviewing us for the Million Masked Man March. A kid says, here they are. They're right over there. So I'm standing right there when the limos from TEPCO, and so I sent that kid over there. I'm like, get over there. And he got over there, and I'm right behind him, and I says, and they were all Japanese. So I'm standing there as they went into the White House. I mean, the irony of it is incredible. And then Sure enough, they pivoted, and CNN comes out with their Pandora's promise. I mean, all they did, and then we caught a screen capture. An activist caught this on film. Jet, very low over Fukushima, and he caught it on film, and everybody's like, well, what's the significance? That's giant, and I'll tell you why that's giant. Because they can surveil us from outer spaces, which they've been doing the whole time. For that jet to be lowering down very low across it, they have detection devices inside those planes, like Radnet, and they're detecting the tritium level. Now, what is tritium? Tritium is a byproduct of, we know factually, nuclear fission is tritium. Now, Einstein made this famous quote. He says the most powerful force on Earth is compounding. He wasn't talking about your bank account. He was talking about nuclear fission. Tritium is the byproduct of nuclear fission. If you see exponential tritium levels, you got nuclear fission. All summer long, all fall long, every time we hear TEPCO's wells, new record tritium levels, 10 times sugar, 100 times tritium levels. So the whole irony of how this is played out, it just tells you that the military wanted it. Now, is it too late for them to entomb it now? I believe so. I believe it is too late. But I believe that they had the capability to do it in the early days. I believe it could have been done.
Sure. They did it with Chernobyl, and I want to go back to what you said about they wanted the keys, which meant they wanted to fix it, and they were told to stand down, basically. And we've seen this before with 9/11. So it's really important for me to point out those patterns, because we're seeing them over and over and over again, which tells us that the people in charge are insane and are committed to depopulation. And if we don't get them out of the system and stop them from pushing the buttons, they're going to get their way. So that's really important. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to Reactor 4. It had MOX fuel in it, but also what did it have on it that made it so bad? Didn't it have the spent rods on top of it as well? Or do I have that wrong?
No. The spent fuel, which is sitting on shelves, now, here's how that played out, and here's where the misinformation goes on 4 and 3. We didn't know that number 3 had MOX fuel until this summer. Even as hardcore activists, we hypothesized that, but we knew for a fact that number 4 did, and it was all stored. It's stored just sitting there on shelves in its pools, like they all are on all 104 of them here in the United States, exact same scenario. But some of it's MOX and some's not. So, it was widely reported, and always for about a year and a half, this is the game they play, and this is the slowly feeding you this 10% of the truth. John Goffman, Poison Power, the brilliant, which I knew personally, wrote about this clear back then at Berkeley, and he was absolutely right. So what they would say is, hey, we're going to get the fuel out of number 4. It's the most dangerous fuel. The reactor itself is sinking. It's on unstable ground. If it falls, North America's over because it's moxie fuel sitting there, which was all a lie. It was all a giant orchestrated shiny ball lie. When CBS 60 Minutes went over there the other day, we see that finally over there on CBS News. The pictures they're using of the spent fuel pools aren't even Fukushima, Japan. I mean, that's how outrageous. The spent fuel pools cracked immediately the day that it happened. And those moxie fuels spilled all over the floor, which is China syndrome. So number 4 has been in meltdown from day one. Those pools were empty from day one, many of them. So these photos they see, most of them aren't even the photos. Now they'll show you some photos of some beautiful swimming pools over there in some of, because it's so huge and there's so much of it. Well, lo and behold, there was MOX fuel in number 3 too that went into meltdown, that they were actually doing something with. It wasn't just stored there. Number 3, what they were up to in number 3, who knows? But it wasn't just making electricity for, power plants. It was it's all weaponry. It's all weaponry.
Yes, it absolutely is. Let me ask you this, because this is a question that I suspect and at the same time hope neophytes will ask listening to this. You talked about Yucca Mountain being a storage facility for the waste. But then we're talking about spent fuel rods being stored on top of these reactors. Why did the rods not go to Yucca Mountain? Why did that not happen?
Here's the deal. It's so important with Yucca Mountain. Now, Allison McFarlane is the new head of the NRC. nuclear. She wrote a book. She's a geologist who I know. I've known her for years and years and years. I used to really have a lot of respect for her, but I don't anymore. She wrote a book. There's an ancient aquifer under Yucca Mountain, and we can't store it there, and it's a horrible solution. She's ranted and raved for years to shoot it into space. I've argued that it should go to Yucca Mountain. Now, she's convinced me since. I mean, for 20 years I was against her, but, you know, I'm all for shooting into space now. There's no good answer. It has to go. So, anyway, so the debate went on about Yucca Mountain since it was supposed to be by law. All of the people were supposed to be going to Yucca Mountain in 1976 was the law. Every single president has signed an executive order to kick the can. Now, people will say the debate raged because the geologists say it's not safe and we don't want to transport it across the country, which is bullshit because we transport it every day, all over the country. The true reason that Yucca Mountain is not used.
It is true, though. I do want to interject. It is true, though, that Las Vegas actually sits on like 128 different faults.
Oh, absolutely. It's no good answer. Absolutely. And I know that. And I know that. There are no good answers. They're both horrible. Yucca Mountain's a horrible idea. Horrible freaking answer. Shooting in space is a horrible. That nuclear power is a horrible idea because there's no answer for the waste. There are no good answers. They're all horrible. They're horrible. So what is the answer?
Safe use. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're all 104 sitting here. That's why nuclear should have never happened. Just that alone, there's no answer for the waste. It's everywhere. In my work, I use the number 252, and people argue with me all the time, say those are 104 reactors. I said, no, it's stupid, because I use all the secret. And I have my own little map that I've developed. One day I'll put it in a book. But anyway, it's everywhere. And so the answer has been to turn it into nuclear weapons, and that's the only reason it's not in Yucca Mountain. That's the only reason it has not been shot into space, because the nuclear weapons industry, and we don't even need nuclear, we just make more and more, because it's the cash cow. It's the greatest cash. Do you think the bankers 1%? They make more money off nuclear than they ever made in a bank. It's the greatest cash cow in human history. We pay for it. We insure it. We as taxpayers do it, everything, and we don't use any of it, by the way. We don't use the nuclear power, very little of it. We don't even use it.
Yeah.
Do you see any rolling blackouts in Japan? Do you see any rolling blackouts in San Diego? By the way, I was the lead on getting San Onofre shut down. They told us, oh, San Onofre makes 12% of the Western grid. Bullshit. Hottest summer in the history of the United States. No black. We got San Onofre's been shut down. By the way, we had an accident at San Onofre, and I exposed that in critical condition with a central line hanging out of my jugular vein.
In fact, wasn't MOX fuel used there as well?
Oh, yes. It was the reactor change-out that we caught him. I'm in critical condition, almost dead, given no chance. I'm down to 190 pounds. I mean, I'm so sick, in critical condition, quarantined in a bone marrow transplant center. And I'm getting hundreds of emails a day, being under attack by the shields. Busby attacked me, Gunderson attacking me. Why I'm in critical condition? Somebody from inside San Onofre sent me a link. And he said, Kevin, I work at San Onofre. I know you're an activist on this. When they're switching out the reactor, it had an accident in there, blah, 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 all this stuff. So I started reporting it out of my room. I started sending the links to the local media down there. By the way, the reactor's parked right out behind my house, the Energy Solutions thing. So we started as activists reporting this. Well, the San Diego media started to talk about it, the local media. Sure as shit, we caught him red-handed. We caught him, and I've been working with Barbara Boxer's office intensely. We want them put in jail because they lied to the NRC. If you watch the videos of me I organized the meeting down there, which I got kicked out of, by the way. The police followed me around, and I got kicked out of before I even spoke. I mean, they followed me everywhere, and there's plenty of people, and it's all over video. You can watch it all. And we exposed the fraud. We exposed it, and I educated Boxer, and Barbara Boxer's office called for hearings. They were going to be September the 23rd on Fukushima and San Onofre. We want these people in jail. And sure as shit, we got them. We got committee. We got hearings in D.C. Well, a week before I was headed there, a week before we get a memo, oh, they've been pushed underground under the Patriot Act. So the hearing supposedly happened. But what good's a hearing if we can't even see it? No transfer. That's the power they have. The Patriot Act gave them carte blanche.
Yes,
they do whatever they want now.
National security as an excuse for everything, don't they? Oh, that's a matter of national security. You don't get to know that.
Did you know this? A lot of people don't know this. This is the most corrupt thing I've ever heard of in my life. The NRC, post-Fukushima, just took out a pencil. They're supposed to be there to protect us. The NRC represents us. They're the agent. The Nuclear Regulatory Committee, Allison McFarland, to block Yucca Mountains ahead of it. They signed a document that they turned all 104 nuclear reactors in the United States into official nuclear dump sites. So they don't have to move. And they call it dry casting, which is we're just going to leave it on site. Harry Reid's words, we're going to leave it on site. And I'm like, you can't do that. It takes an act of Congress. They're like, we don't care. So I've been going to Barbara Boxer's office. She's head of the committee, and Wyden. And then there's a famous interview with me and Mike Lee, where I go at it with him. It's all over YouTube, and he lied to me on that, too. So they're storing it on site when they were never built to store any of it on site. And they did it without congressional approval, which is against the law. They don't care. And so I've been arguing, well, what are you talking about? You can't just turn them into sites with what? Because you signed a piece of paper? And it wasn't even the president who did it. It was the Nuclear Regulatory Committee who did it. They don't have that kind of power. So Barbara Boxer opened committees on him, and Barbara Boxer released a statement this fall and just went crazy on Allison McFarland. Went on, she sent her staffers, and I'm the one who prepped her. I prepped her. I've been talking to their staff on the phone once a week all year long for 2 years. They went in, and the Nuclear Regulatory Committee, they're so arrogant of power, told Senator Boxer's staff, she's head of the committee, they couldn't have the records to get out. They kicked them out. And so Senator Boxer goes crazy, says, you don't have that kind of power. Congressional oversight committees have power over you, and I want people to go to jail. She said that statement in, I believe, November or October of this year. Not another peep out of them. We haven't heard a peep yet since. So she was told to shut up. The power they wield is grotesque.
It is grotesque, and I've been trying to explain for several years now that death is the biggest business this planet has ever seen. It doesn't matter if you're talking about big pharma, big agriculture, big nuclear. The money is in death. So, that entire paradigm has to change, and these people absolutely belong in jail. They belong behind bars for what they've done. It's genocide. It's murder.
We need the Hague all over again. These are crimes, the greatest crimes against humanity in human history, and we need a new Hague.
That's right. If you and I murdered one person, we would probably go to jail for life. But they murder millions and they get off scot-free the same way the bankers do. It's disgusting. So that's something that we really have to address. Now,
well, I have hope on this because here's what I say about this is I think the control freaks are out of control, and they've gone too far on this one. They've gone too far on this one because they're not immune. They're not safe. I think they're getting scared, and I think this is the one that's going to break. I really do think this is going to break the power vacuum of the so-called 1% or whatever these, elitists are, and whatever is funneled up. It's going to break and people say, oh no, they have the money, they can say bullshit. One of my doctors was Steve Jobs' doctor. Steve Jobs was one of the richest men on earth. He really did. His arrogance, he was a prick, by the way. I knew him because I was a semiconductor analyst. I used to attend those meetings. He really thought his money was going to save him. He was 54 years old. He had 3 transplants, experimental. My daughter says they threw the kitchen sink. He really thought he was going to he thought his money could, and he died. Fukushima is going to kill just as many of those elite pricks as it is us common peasants.
And not just people, but the animals, too. And this is the other very disturbing thing. People don't understand manufactured lack. You look at the stock market and weather modification. It's one thing to bet on the weather, which they do. It's another thing to be in control of the technology that will give you the outcome you're going to bet on. And that kind of corruption is throughout every single system that we have. Now, I want to talk about buckyballs. What are buckyballs, and when were they first noticed?
That's a good question. They were first noticed shortly thereafter Fukushima on the beach. There you go, Andrew, on the beach.
Yeah, there's they're like permeable nanospheres formed through. Kevin, help me, please. Through the interaction between the hot particles and the seawater. So it makes it like a perfect delivery vehicle for radiation to reach the beaches of California. If you can imagine, the hot particle inside and the protective sphere around it. That's what I understand to be the radioactive buckyball.
So
well, buckyballs, and what I think they are, I've been asked this a lot of times. I go back to plutonium. I think they're heavy metal that's being created out of atmospheric fission or whatever. But I think it's a new product. I think it's something that we don't know what it is, and I think it's the byproduct of nuclear fission. And it's little metal that's in. Now we know that plutonium is a heavy metal, literally. Yeah, you can't see it, you can't smell it, but it is a heavy metal. Now you get enough of it, you put it together, you'll actually see it. It'll be a buckyball. That's what I think it is. Now, I don't think anybody really knows, but we know they're real, and we know they've been showing up on the beach, and nobody knows. So, this is new elements that are being created out of a nuclear fission event, which all the great scientists told us that was going to happen, that we don't know, and this would create all kinds of different scenarios and different elements we're going to develop from this, and that's what a buckyball is.
Andrew, in your films, you talked about a Japanese concept called gammon. Can you explain for us what that is and what that means?
Yeah, it means it's an idea to persevere, like through any kind of hardship. And it's not necessarily, we think of like in the West, like we persevere, to gain a goal, like to win the match or whatever. But when I was in Japan, I sort of understand what it means through feeling it through the Japanese people. And for them, it's an end in itself, in that the value of gaman is exercising it in itself. So you're not really critical of is the end product of our endurance going to get us something good, and that's not really what they're thinking about. It's an end in itself. That the act of persevering is value, and so it's kind of it's a very tragic thing, because the Japanese people will do their duty until the end, and not really
without complaining.
Yeah, without complaining. So if you're in a team, like just do what's good for the team, and not question like, should we really be playing this soccer match at all? I mean, considering the radiation is afoot, so it's a very uncritical blind spot in their culture. If I'd be so bold as to say, as criticize the whole country, but it's in some ways it's a very beautiful thing, because the Japanese come together so magnificently, but there's someone unique in their charge, and that's leading them to a place that they, as a human, don't really, dare I say, want to be. But also, Crystal, like, before you're talking about the elite, their radiation's going to kill them too. I alluded to, like, in the second movie, the likes of Fukushima at the end, I was sort of going on to the sort of transhumanist side of what their motivations may be. It's a sort of a risky area to go to, but you may want to tackle it later in this interview, but it's tempting to believe that these elites, they believe that they can escape this radioactive morass through new technologies, or whether it's true or not. There's more than enough literature to suggest that this is what they're aiming for, and it's what they've been deluded into pursuing. I was wondering if that would sort of help you with your question before, like, are they that crazy to destroy the planet? And greed is the motivator, but there's also that element of self-interest. Like that, I've got this way out. I was wondering if you had a tie in there, or yeah.
Well, it's still a rather insane tactic because, transhumanism, the way they present it is merging man with machine, not necessarily becoming a machine in its entirety, but so if you're still, if you still have a human body, even if it's augmented, by a machine, you're still going to experience the effects of radiation. And I think what people really have to consider when they talk about transhumanism is that you're talking about the exact same people that have one rule for them and one rule for you. So while they're trying to con you into, oh, it's so great, let's merge your mind with a machine, if you don't think they have the perfect slave now, well, they will when they can, literally control you through a computer interface. And I can assure you that while they're trying to sell it as, oh, look, we'll all be augmented humans, they'll be superhumans and you'll be the subhumans, and it will be more of the same that we have now, only it will be so aberrant. Yeah, so aberrant and so atrocious. Yeah.
The thing is, I think it needs to be called out, this segment. It's very important that the Japanese have protested in gigantic, massive numbers. The media just hasn't covered it.
Yes,
and it's against the law.
Yeah.
It's against the law. Now, these laws that have come up recently, people say, oh, they've just been it's against the law to tweet. I used to get hundreds and hundreds of emails a day, every day from Fukushima, Japan, including the early days that Kathy Iwan herself, who fled Japan, people that were trapped in Japan, the only reports were getting from me. And, so I had tons of relationships in Japan. September 26, 2012 is when the law was passed. I did a radio show over there post that within Tokyo, and the professor that did the radio show went to jail. So they started locking people up, and so now the laws have been bolstered. You want to talk fascism and control? It is against the law in Japan. If you're in Japan, you're over there, just talk about it, tweet about it, YouTube about it, and it is illegal. And so, some people slide away with it here and there, but if you got any clout, you're a professor, you're a person in politics, you're a news reporter with any real clout. Now, HNK, they control what that gets out, and, they've been putting a squash on that. I get zero emails from Japan now. They arrest you. So it isn't like the Japanese haven't been protesting. I mean, look up the photographs. Some of those protests are millions of people, including, if you want to see something really powerful on the Japanese, Amy finally went over there from Democracy Now! Now, I know Amy's producer well. My daughter used to date him, blah, blah, blah. She went over there and she didn't know, and their crew went to the emperor's house. This is just last week, 2 weeks ago. They went to the emperor's house just searching around, trying to get the video feed. And there was a protest going there. And they hurried and videoed it, and they interviewed a Japanese woman who spoke good English. And she laid it out about nuclear. And she's crying through the thing. It's everything you ever wanted to know about the nuclear evil cartel. And Amy hurried through, and, she's very, Democracy Now!, they're very protective of what they put out. She's in the club, and she's not about to break ranks, but she threw it up. And I'll tell you what, and I was like, oh my God, so the protests are happening in Japan to this day. No one's reporting it. Now, Caroline Kennedy's over there now. She's the ambassador to Japan now. It's a big deal because she's anti-nuclear, and she didn't know. And I'm getting this while I was at the Megan Rice hearing. People who know Caroline, who know me, blah, 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 blah. And she was aghast. The 50th anniversary of her father's, funeral, she was in Fukushima. She saw it. So we do have people of power that are starting to see it and starting to come forward, and people in Japan are protesting every day, Our scummy media just won't report it.
That's right, and I thank you for bringing that up, because I was actually going to move in that direction from the I know I'm butchering the pronunciation of the Gammon principle, because it's basically suffering in silence, but you see these people are no longer willing to do that, and that is definitely a change in the right direction.
Big time. They're protesting big time over there.
I got the impression it was a regular protest as well from that report, because I'm pretty sure I saw the same report you're talking about, Kevin. And I think she said it was a regular thing, that they stood outside a particular government building.
They've been every day since Fukushima. Yeah. They've been at the Emperor's house, or the Prime Minister, which they've had a different... By the way, the old Prime Minister was pro-nuclear. Him, Gregory Jacko, and, well, disposable hell, Caldecott, and I don't have a lot of good things to say about her right now. But anyway, they all three teamed up on there. Now, you got to remember, Gregory Jacko is held... He can only say so much because he was in the Situation Room. He's head of the NRC in Fukushima. But they've joined together as anti-nuke forces. Are they doing much with it? No, but they are anti-nuclear. You know, so the Prime Minister of Japan, you know, he's come out. He's been pretty bold in some of his statements, and he was pro-nuclear, and he's an anti-nuclear big time now. So that says a lot. And they protested in front of that residence every single day since Fukushima happened. That's 1,050-some days. So they're there in numbers.
Yeah, and that's really important. And Andrew had mentioned in his films not just the nuclear meltdown, but also marriage meltdowns, in terms of, you know, how in their culture the women are super supportive of their male partners' careers and you know, and their corporate leanings and support, but a lot of these women left Japan and their marriages were destroyed. So and some of the people who are left that can't afford to leave, I mean, look, if there was an accident here like that in Las Vegas, I couldn't afford to leave. So I completely understand. And
the elitists did leave. They left. Look, I taught at the #1 school of business in the United States. I graduated from it. When I graduated, there was only 27 graduates. 14 of them were Japanese. I'm very close with them, and they're the elites of the elites. I'm very tight with them. Mikado, who's translated all this stuff for me, she's brilliant. She's in the royal family, the elite family. I mean, they fled. They fled Tokyo. They went to Brazil. They went to... I talk to her all the time. They're in Hong Kong. They left, and they're not going back. So, what is it? I mean, like you said, like we could leave if we wanted to. Who can afford to just pick up and go to another country or city and leave everything behind?
That's
very
right.
few.
That's right. It's a very sad, very, very sad situation. And there's another caveat to this. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the inner workings of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But I noticed, I thought this was also brilliant in your videos, Andrew, where you discussed the difference between what happened with Fukushima and their food and what's happening in Japan with their food. And you had video of a farmer standing up in front of his representatives and saying, we're selling this food and we won't eat it ourselves. We know that it's contaminated. And the people in charge of Chernobyl never would have done that. And if the Trans-Pacific Partnership is passed, one of the mandates is you will not know where anything is coming from. It will not be labeled. You won't know if your seafood is coming from Japan. And that is by design also, which is not a good situation.
It's already happening, by the way. We don't know now in the U.S. The fish chain here, we don't know now. That's why I tell people don't eat fish. We don't know where it comes from.
No. And, you know, sushi was my favorite food for so long, and I haven't eaten it in a couple of years. My son, I've got a teenage son who would prefer fish over a hamburger. Well, I won't let him eat it anymore. It's not safe, you know. And this is the other thing that people don't understand. And the social engineers that are depopulationists have talked about this. They are purposefully, it's called manufactured lack. They are purposefully attacking our food supplies because the overpopulation lie is based on, well, you know, the mindless breeders are, you know, they breed too much and they eat too much and they exhale too much carbon and, you know, they're the problem. Which absolutely is not true. And I think that people also have to look at planned obsolescence because this is part of the overpopulation lie. These people make crappy products on purpose, because they know if they make a printer that lasts 5 years, their sales are going to plummet. So they make stuff that they know is going to break, that you're going to have to replace, which is a strain on the environment from a corporate interest.
Clear back to Hamilton. That's how this country was accepted. We have one tool to fight back on that. One tool. It's called the tariff. Until we can have debates about tariffs, that's the only way you stop any of this. You know, Alexander Hamilton, the Coast Guard was the first 8 employees. They were all, you know, the East India Company. Walmart is the new East India. These maniacs have always existed, and we can't even have that kind. The TPP, NAFTA, you know, is on Balco. This has been going on, and it's a 1,000-year-old argument. And there's only one thing: the United States, the Revolutionary War was a tariff war. And we had tariffs, and they worked. They worked for a long time. And, you know, well, we can call it the New World Order. I call it the Old World Order. It's feudalism.
Yeah, it is.
King George, 1774. And there's one tool, and only one tool, and they work. And it breaks it all down. But if the American populace would demand tariffs back, it would fix it all. But, you know, these elitists and these social engineers through that box, I believe that Fox News is a CIA co-op. I call it Foxconn by the military industrialized complex. So we can't have debates about tariffs. If we had that debate in the American public, we would fix it all, and they would be done. They would be done. And that's why they're junkie products calling Walmart the new East India Company.
Well, the point I want to make about planned obsolescence is that this is part of their plan, and that people are being set up to fail, because the faster those garbage dumps fill up, the faster their pockets fill up. But they, in turn around and blame you. There's too many of you on the planet. You consume too much. You buy too much. You breed too much. This is not the case. And so planned obsolescence is not just about products. It's about people now. And that was always where it was meant to go. And this phony green movement precautionary principle that you constantly hear the Agenda 21 idiots spewing out is, well, we should just behave as though it's bad until we know for sure. And they apply that to population growth. But did they do that with vaccines, fluoride, chemtrails, nuclearism? No, they didn't. And people really need to get that. You know, there's one rule for them and one rule for us.
Yeah, it's amazing. They're using all our interactions to cull us, basically, like the TV and the food and all the points of interaction of our daily lives are sort of weaponized against us.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, people really have to get their head around that. These people want 9 out of every 10 people currently living dead. And as I read in the beginning, some of these people aren't happy with things like GMOs, which have been proven when they're fed to animals fed this food either became sterile or gave birth to empty water sacs, and they're feeding it to you. So, and the vaccines have sterilized people in Africa. Bill Gates was behind that. So, you know, the future of the human race is being attacked in a multitude of different ways, but it's always coming from the same people, from the same mindset. We really have to get these people out of power and get them away from the buttons. Today I found this article that was talking about how, I think it's, I thought I wrote it down here. Sorry if I didn't, but it was 17 towns in California are going to run out of water in the next 90 days. Well, that's geoengineering. And a lot of these movies that you see, you know, whether it's Elysium, or there was a movie that my husband and I watched the other night, and it's got, the guy that played Han Solo and the Tomb Raider guy, I can't think of his name right now. Harrison Ford. Thank you. That was my husband in the background. Harrison Ford in it, and you always see this in the movies, in the futuristic movies, and this is the Agenda 21 cell where the earth is beautiful and pristine, and there's no farms. There's these glass-like cathedral cities where everybody's been crammed into. And in this particular movie we just watched, there was a child who was being used. He thought he was playing a video game, and when in fact he extinguished an entire race of aliens that we were supposedly at war with. And constantly throughout this movie they pushed the Agenda 21 because he was a third child, meaning they had to have permission to have him. And they kept saying, well, this race has overbred the same way humans did. Look, the only people that the earth is overpopulated with are the psychopaths in power. You and I aren't doing this. You and I didn't create Corexit. We didn't create nuclearism. We didn't create fluoride and vaccines and GMOs and chemtrails. They're doing this, but they're blaming you for it and trying to make you the bad guy. And this is something that I think people really need to get straight.
Well, they play on it as being, being good for you, or we're going to develop an anti-cancer vaccine. They put out these stories of, someone who didn't take the vaccine and now look what they are, how they're affected. And, of course, that those stories can arise, but, what's in the vaccine itself?
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. I've said for a long time, and I know it sounds kind of weird, but it's really true. I think the war on knowledge has to do with the fact that these people are decoding. It doesn't matter if you want to call it natural law or intelligent design or creational design, but they are decoding it to weaponize it and use it against us, which is why they're not telling us how it works. And this is what those vaccines did to these women in Africa. Only the women were vaccinated for tetanus, and those vaccines, just like a virus on your computer, went in and reprogrammed their bodies so that now when they get pregnant, their body attacks the pregnancy and they're sterile.
My PhD, I dive completely into all this. My PhD, post-ignorant, and I break it all down to economics. Now, I work with a lot of different people to break it down to food, break it down to, but my forte, I break it all down to economics. I talk about the strongest middle class in human history, which was the United States from 1945 to 1979. The average person working 40 hours a week, one person working 40 hours a week. So, and I go back to Frederick Taylor's work that he proved that the most productive, healthiest human was a 40-hour worker, and anything over was counterproductive. The average American is working 65 hours, so what caused it all? Again, tariffs. We got rid of usury laws, we got rid of tariffs, we quit enforcing antitrust law. What is an antitrust law? It goes after these monsters. So when you're working 65 hours a week, it takes two people working 65 hours a week to have the exact same lifestyle that our parents had with one working 40. You don't have,
that's
the
right.
social engineering, so I break it all the way down. So it could be fixed, but has it gone too far? And it spills over into all of this. You're stressed. You don't have time.
Yeah.
How can you read a book? How can you be well read? How can you have knowledge? That's why it's post-ignorance.
Yeah, how can you be the parent of your child instead of the state when you don't even see them? Yeah. I gave up my corporate job 10 years ago, and my family went bankrupt, and we go without a lot. But I'll tell you what, it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. Because
I made $900,000. My bonus check in 1999 was $900,000. I was on Wall Street. I was a derivative arbitrage specialist. Very good at what I did. Very. You know what I made last year? I went from that to, I'm full of leukemia. I made nothing last year. So, like I said, people need to get their priorities straight.
Yeah, there's that
start
beautiful
raising their
quote.
children.
There's that beautiful quote that you used about Steve Jobs, and I'm going to butcher it, I'm sure, but not another moment can your money buy. Is that how that goes?
Not another minute.
Yeah. And I think you guys might find this interesting because you see that we are in a dictatorship because anybody who will not go along with the official narrative is being punished for it. And there have been many, many people suicided. Of course, there was Breitbart, there was Aaron Schwartz, there was a lot of people, but I think you guys will find this interesting.
Michael Hastings.
Yes, that's right. there have been 3 major personalities in the banking industry in the last 6 days that have supposedly committed suicide. One of them was the former Federal Reserve economist, whose name was Mike Duker, if I can read my writing. The second one was the former senior manager for Deutsche Bank. And the other one was the vice president of J.P. Morgan Chase's London headquarters. Now, if you go look at the stories about the way these people committed suicide, it's very fishy. They were suicided, I think, because these people understand that what they're doing is wrong, and I think they were going to talk. And Obama is cleaning house of all these people. You saw his reaction to Snowden. And at what point, and this goes back to Megan Rice, at what point is pointing out the criminality of your government, how do you get to a point where you become the criminal for pointing that out?
Well, I think the thumbprint to all this incredible madness, and they look back, is Megan Rice. Now, I was there, sitting in there, all my activism, and I've done a lot of power of act, especially in the last 12 months. I've been all over things that I've done. Never in my life have I had emotion like I had in that courtroom with Megan Rice 2 days ago. It's her 84th birthday today, by the way. Now, anybody who doesn't know who Megan Rice is or what about Megan Rice, Megan Rice is the daughter of Dr. Rice, the famous professor from NYU. Her mother, the famous Columbia professor. The Dorothy Day, the women's Catholic rights, which is the greatest human rights activist in American history, is Dorothy Day. No, it's undebatable. That's who raised her. She's 83 years old. She can pick anything she wants. She coined the term nuclearism, by the way. I met her right there where you guys are at, in the Nevada test site. But she broke into Y-12. Now, people need to know this, that everybody says they splattered blood, whatever. They're called plowshares. They're hardcore spiritual anti-nukers, and they will stop at no cost, and they are unwavering, their group. She and 2 other activists, Michael and Greg, a famous activist in Chicago, one of the originators of plowshares, hardcore anti-nukers, before he died, he took vials of his blood. And his wishes on his death was at some point he hoped somebody would sprinkle his blood in Y-12. Y-12 is the head of the snake at in Oak Ridge, where the Manhattan Project, which I spent 2 days out there. It's beyond creepy out there. And anyway, that's where they make nuclear weapons illegally. We signed a non-proliferation contract in the 80s to get rid of them. The United States government is violating international law on a daily basis, and they know it. So not only that, we pay billions of dollars for contracted security to guard Y-12. It's the most dangerous material on the face of the earth. She went in the middle of broad daylight, snipped the fence. She's 83-year-old, 4 foot nothing, none. Went in there, sprinkled the vials of blood, knew they'd be arrested. She's been arrested many times, including in Nevada. But that's where I met her. Years ago. They went in there. They were there for 6 hours before security even knew they were there. She was arrested. Thought she would do, her normal 30, 60, 90 days. She knew what she was up to. She's a brilliant genius, an elderly woman. They charged her under the Patriot Act with, sabotage, all kinds of things. So, anyway, they tried to make an example out of an 84-year-old woman. No due process. So, anyway, she gets convicted. When she's convicted, found guilty, the judge asked her, do you have any regrets? Yes, Your Honor, I have one regret. The judge trying to get her to beg for mercy. I mean, really, it is William Wallace. On Balco. And she says, yeah, Your Honor. And he says, well, what is it that I didn't do this 70 years ago? So he wouldn't release her. They've been sitting in jail for a year and a half, or 8 months in a federal holding facility to set up to hold somebody for 3 weeks. She's been in it for 7 months, 55 degrees. They keep kicking the can on her sentencing. It's abuse of an elderly woman. It is the most grotesque thing I've ever seen in my life.
That's right.
Anyway, so I was at the hearing. I was at the sentencing hearing. It snowed in Knoxville, and there's some real lunatics in Knoxville, by the way. But anyway, the judge just cut it off. We had a potluck dinner the night before. I use Hamlet, and I have Danish bloodlines, and my uncle is named Claudius. Oh, cursed spite that I was ever born to set this right. When I watched him load my father in the freaking body bag, it lit a fire in me, and I will fight these bastards and these pricks to the day I die. I hate them. I truly hate them. And Megan Rice, she stood up for me and my father in the Nevada Test site when I met her. She stood up for the atomic veterans when nobody wanted to hear it. She did, so I stand up for her. And so the more people that know this story, the judge got 20,000 personal letters. 20,000. My petition I got over 500,000. So people do know, but the people that know need to stand up and fight. We need to stand up and fight, and in an intelligent way.
There are some stories I would like to share with you guys, because I have my own family members who have been damaged by radiation, and I want to share what they went through, as well as things that I know about the EPA and the CDC, because people really have to get their head around how corrupt all of these organizations are. The EPA is here the Environmental Protection Agency. That is not their mandate. That is not what they do, and people need to know that. They need to be dismantled, put in jail, and if we really want some oversight, if we want a genuine, government panel that will actually, really protect the environment, then we need to make sure it happens. But that's not what these people are for. The FDA, the Federal Death Administration, that's what that's about. These people are not who they say they are. They're not who you think they are, and you can't keep depending on these people. But I think Dave's away for a minute, so until he comes back, I'll share some stories with you guys. When I was 15, my family moved to a mining town in northern Nevada. And I had family members who had worked for this. Now, this mine was called Kennecott. I don't know what it's called now. I know they're still in business. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go back to some of the stories that I was going to share before the break. So my family and I moved to this small mining town in northern Nevada when I was 15. And there was, at this time, a 90% unemployment rate because it was a mining town, and the mine was closed. So as a teenager, I'm competing with the parents of the children I go to school with for jobs. It was very, very depressed. Now, I had family members who had worked for the mine who had told us stories about how their job was to cart away the dead carcasses of animals who had drank from the cesspools, and we used to go up in the mountains and have our kegers on the weekends on these giant green and orange mounds. And this, at the time, this was the largest open pit mine on the planet. It was so large you could see it from space, and they were leach mining. And this is where they use all kinds of really nasty chemicals like cyanide to basically eat everything but the ore. And we were drinking well water. So after we moved there, my family and I got very sick. I got very, very sick, sicker than my stepfather did at the time. And it really affected my nervous system, my cognitive function. I would stutter. I couldn't remember thoughts. I couldn't piece words together. My memory was really bad. I would go to grab a glass of milk and I would miss and knock it off the table. And I remember sleeping for almost 2 weeks straight once in the summer. And I just vaguely remember, it's almost like a dream, my stepfather coming in and saying, dinner's ready, and I was laying on my back in bed, and I tried to lift my head to respond, and it was like there was an elephant on my head. I literally didn't have the strength to lift my own head. So we went to the doctor, the local doctor, and he said, you've got chronic fatigue syndrome. It's yuppie flu. Everybody here has it. Take some B12 injections and you'll be fine. So I graduated young. I was 17, and I left home the very next morning, and I moved to Las Vegas, and I got better right away. And I subscribed to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, the paper here, the Sunday paper. And I remember about a year after I had left and I was living here, I read this article about how Salt Lake City was suing Kennecott for destroying their surface and groundwater with the chemicals, their mining chemicals. And then I knew, I could put it together, I knew exactly what had happened. So I called the CDC, and I said, I want to report an illness linked to contaminated water. And they said, oh, no, we don't handle that. You have to call the EPA. So they gave me the number to the head of the state of Nevada for the EPA, and I called him, and he said, oh, no, we don't handle that. You have to go back to the CDC. Okay, so they're sending me in circles. And it was now, while they're lying to me on the phone, and I didn't find this out until years later because I had friends and family who still lived there. They lied to me on the phone, but meanwhile, I had a friend whose father worked for the assay department. And years later, I was telling her the story, and she said, oh, that's why the EPA and the CDC came in very quietly. They built new wells, and they fenced off the contaminated areas. Okay. Now, my mother, who grew up out here in the Nevada desert near Las Vegas, used to tell me stories. There's a place out here in Nevada, you know, the test site is divided into a whole bunch of different subgroups. So, you know, you have Area 51, you have Area 12, but there was also an area called, it was, let me see, I wrote it down here so I could be specific. Okay, it was a place called Jackass Flats, which was test site area number 400. And my mother used to tell me stories about how her father would break beer bottles so that they could put those over their eyes and watch the nuclear bombs go off on Jackass Flats from their front porch. So my grandmother, same thing. She had a goiter, she had a thyroid problem, she had a goiter, and then she got cervical cancer. She was one of the first people that they did, I think it's called cobalt radiation on. She died. My husband's grandfather, who died a couple of years ago, he retired from the Nevada test site. He was one of the construction workers that used to build the towns that they would destroy with the nuclear bombs. And they were told that the pig, you know, the animals, the pigs were safe. They used to eat the radioactive pigs. So this man, he was tough. He was like your dad, Kevin. Tough guy. He had 30 surgeries on his stomach. And he was one of the very first people who ever had that surgery where they will cut out a piece of your colon and then sew it back together. And he and all these people eventually learned that they were guinea pigs. They filed a class action lawsuit. And this lawsuit was pushed off and pushed off and pushed off because the government was hoping that all of these people would die first because they were old. And in the end, only 3 people lived long enough to see any of it, and one of those was my grandfather, or my husband's grandfather. So, and I wish Christina was here because I was going back through some of her work on her Nuked Radio program, which people can just go to YouTube and type in Nuked Radio and they'll find it. And I was randomly sifting, because she's done like 100 episodes, so I'm randomly sifting. And I came across episode number 82, where there's her and this, her partner that she had doing the show with her called Jules, and they're talking about everything that they have personally been through. Having been exposed to radiation from their pregnancies to their thyroids, and this is exactly what I have experienced myself. So when we're trying to tell people that Fukushima is bad and a lot of people are going to die, I think what's really important to reiterate is that it's one of the other reasons it's so bad is that people have not stopped dying from what they've already done. People are still dying from that. And
bioaccumulative.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really sad. And this was the other thing that really got me. So now I lost a child. When my son was 5, I got pregnant again, and in my second trimester, I lost a child, and I was having thyroid problems at this point. And this is a weird story, and it's true, and I'll tell it to you in a moment. I didn't find out that I had cervical problems until I lost that child. Now, after that, I had been going to a doctor trying to figure out what was wrong, what was going on. And I had had all the tests done, the thyroid tests done, and they were all coming back normal. And this is a bizarre story, but I swear to you it's true. In 2000, a girlfriend of mine wanted me to go see a psychic with her, so I went. This woman gave me my future 6 years in advance and even told me I would lose a child. And she said to me, "You know what causes that, right?" And I said yes, because I thought I did. And I didn't, and I tried to prevent it, and it didn't work, because I didn't understand what was happening. I went to her later, a few years later, and she said to me, "You have a growth on your thyroid." And I said, "Well, look, I've already had all the tests done, and they came back negative." And she said, "It doesn't matter." She said, "My daughter had the same thing, and hers was cancer." She said, "The only way you're going to know is if you get an ultrasound." So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, how do I convince my doctor? And so I thought, look, I'll just be honest. So I go back to my doctor, and I tell her this story. I said, "Look, I've been to the seer who's really, really good, and she told me that I have a growth on my thyroid and that her daughter had the same thing and her daughter's was cancer." And there's silence, and so I'm thinking, I have no idea how she's going to take this. And then she said to me, "And you didn't ask about me when you went to the psychic?" She agreed to do the ultrasound. So I go have the ultrasound done, and sure enough, the technician says, "Yep, there it is, right there." But this is where things got kind of weird. After the technician sees that I have this growth on my thyroid, she starts getting very upset and agitated, and her face gets very contorted, and she starts demanding to know how I knew. Now, this was a long time ago, and I really forgot about it until I was telling some friends a couple of months ago, and I was thinking about this. I think the reason that she was so upset is because I found it early, and somebody that she loved didn't and died from it. But the other thing that's important about this is, so I'm thinking, okay, great. Now I have proved that this is the problem. So now we have some kind of plan of action, right? So I go back to my doctor. "Okay, great. We know what it is. What do we do now?" And she says, "Oh, we just keep an eye on it. If it grows any bigger, we'll cut it out." I said, "What? What?" Now, that was 10 years ago, and I have never been back, and I have been trying for 10 years to heal it myself, because I know that there's a way to do it, and they aren't going to tell us what it is. And what people don't understand about the thyroid, and this is really important, and this is not shared with a lot of people, the reason that potassium iodine is so important is that the thyroid is a blood filter. And so people who have a dysfunctional thyroid also have immunological problems. And these two things are connected. It's a blood filter working in a very similar fashion to disinfecting water systems, in which water passes through a series of iodide-impregnated resin filters, killing bacteria and viruses. And a lot of people don't know that. So it's your first line of defense. It's a blood filter. When that doesn't work, this is why all of these people with thyroid malfunctions are getting so many infections. And that weakens your immune system. And I think it's very disturbing that we are seeing these same kind of disorders. And it's not just, a thyroid problem in a woman automatically means reproductive disorders. But the thyroid is involved in reproduction, not just sexual reproduction, but cellular reproduction. So when that doesn't work, you age faster, you get heart problems, you get immunodeficiency, all of these other things. But what really bothers me is that we are seeing this exact same thing in the animals now. And this is reported by ENE News in an article they put out a few days ago about hunters concerned for seals and walruses in the Pacific, and they've conditions they have never seen before. These scientists have never seen this before, but these animals have thyroid cysts and lesions on their reproductive systems. It's not just the animals anymore. And I thought it was very interesting, Andrew, that in one of your films you talked about the World Health Organization's propaganda in putting out this bullshit about people poisoning themselves with iodine. You have to have it. In fact, there's this really wonderful man. It's a YouTube video. If you Google iodine insufficiency and cancer, His name, it could be George, maybe Jorge, I don't really know, but it's spelled Jorge D. Fletchis, M.D. And he talks about very specifically how iodine insufficiency causes cancer, especially in women, and he talks about the progression. This is exactly what I have seen. This is what Christina has been through. This is what her partner talked about in that show. And what really blew my mind about that episode is that about 3/4 of the way through, they were talking about another friend they had who had also been exposed to radiation, who had a degenerative disc disease. And I swear to you, not 3 weeks ago, my mother was at my home. She's been in a lot of pain for a long time with her back. And the chiropractor just wasn't working anymore. So she went to the doctor and she was told she has degenerative disc disease. On top of this, during this summer, I reconnected with family that I have living up in the Pacific Northwest around the Portland area. I found out that my cousin, who's 1 year older than me, a mother of, beautiful woman, a mother, has leukemia. And at the same time, my mother's brother was also, and I tried to offer them alternatives before chemotherapy. He had colon cancer and lung cancer and went through 12 rounds of chemotherapy. And the reason I'm sharing this with people is because all of you are going through this on some level. You just don't know it yet. And the current medical system that we have won't or doesn't know how to help you see that you're going in that direction before you get there. And people need to understand that things were already bad before Fukushima. People were still suffering and dying. And then I also found out a few years ago that the town that I lived in northern Nevada also had a very high rate of breast cancer because they were also downwinders. So we've all been exposed, and I think that people who say that not only is Fukushima worse than Chernobyl because no effort, you talk about the battle for Fukushima, or the battle of Chernobyl, there's no battle for Fukushima. But what's happening with Fukushima is after we already have a radiated planet. And that goes back to the accumulation. And I think, going back to that, the gammon idea of the Japanese, there's that saying, and it's a real catch-22 paradox. People say, well, I'm afraid to speak out because they might kill me. But the reality is they're killing you now because you didn't speak out. And that's what we have to get straight. We have to get that right.
We call it the Utah smiley face. Look around at all these young females. And I think it's important as far as the iodine subsidies. It's very, very important. And this is my PhD before I got leukemia. Yeah, you need that in your body, potassium iodine. But to flood it with a pill, it's going to hurt you. You can't flood it. You have to slowly feed it and, subsidize it through food. These ways through food. I'm working with a world-class dietitian. You wouldn't believe what I eat a day. I eat 5 bananas a day. I'm on carrot juice, but, I'm a person who has leukemia. But the way that we fight back, and it is biocommuning, and like I said, we call it the Utah smiley face. In Russia, they call it the Chernobyl necklace. And the thyroid, like I said, the blood filter and all these autoimmune. And by the way, the eagles that were dropping dead right behind my house. And I've been working with the people that are testing. You're exactly all over. You got it exactly right. Their thyroids are compromised, their blood system's compromised, their autoimmune system, and in every living creature on Earth. And we're all freaking dying.
That's
and
right.
We have to protect their thyroid, especially as a woman. But the important thing is it's through food. My dietitian just hammers me all day, every day. That's one thing why people that do beat cancers like AML, like I have, very few people beat it. But the people that do beat it usually live very long, old lives, and I'll tell you why. Scared straight? Oh yeah. You don't even know if scared straight. I went without food and water for 3 months, down to 119 pounds. We learn how to eat. We learn how to exercise. We learn how to fight back. Fighting back, I'm telling you, that is the key to surviving in life. Fighting back. in an intelligent, logical way. And we eat right. I mean, the CDC, well, the scam they are, they'll tell you need 4 or 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, when the reality is we all need about 9. Fresh fruit, fresh vegetables. Now, even they're contaminated, but that's our hope.
And non-GMO.
You have to eat right.
It has
yes,
to be non-GMO.
Absolutely. I don't eat any GMO, anything.
No.
If you see what I'm on a day, like I said, and I walk every day, and I hike, and I take it on, head on. We have to take this on, head on. We have to stand up to cancer. I mean, our hospital advertises it as the bullet, and our hospital's Danish philosophy medicine, by the way. Thimble Peters, the top of LDS Mormon Church, doesn't own it, which you look out over it, you see the open copper mine, you see Kennecott's hideous smell. They're evil bastards here.
They are.
And, you know, who owns Kennecott? Kennecott is Rio Tinto, and Rio Tinto is owned by the Queen of England. 53%. So that's who the poisoners are.
Here's the other thing. This town that I lived in northern Nevada, I actually lived about 18 miles outside of that town in an even smaller town that was actually built to house the miners. And there was a smokestack for the smelter. These towns were in a valley. There was a smokestack for the smelter that was so big and so high it had lights on the top. And the higher those are, the more toxic they are. And that entire valley was covered in black. And it took decades for them to actually grow grass for their cattle to graze on. Talk about accumulative, right? The animals are eating it, you're eating the animals. But after I made those phone calls and they gave me a runaround, do you know that they imploded it and there's no trace of it to be found?
Yeah, they're all over. The stacks are all over here in northern Nevada and Utah, and that was their answer. Now we build up the first autism school, which my PhD was trying to prove that nuclear fallout is autism. We're the autism capital of the world here. 1 in 32. You want to talk on everything? The first autism school, charter school in America, is built in Bountiful, Utah on an old tailing site.
Yeah.
That's how sick these bastards are.
And
They tore them down, covered them up, and lied to us.
That's right. No trace, overdone with, gone, except for the damaged children, which is very sad. And I'll tell you what I think is happening, because the CDC has used this excuse many, many times. Well, the only children suffering from vaccines have mitochondrial dysfunction. Where do you think that's coming from? That's where it's coming from. And here's another interesting story. I've had 2 primary careers in my life, and one was technology and the other one was logistics. And when I was in the technology field, a rep who's an OEM, original equipment manufacturer rep, came and took me and my friend, who was another salesperson, to dinner. And after dinner we had coffee, and the coffee was very good, but I made a comment about Starbucks and how good a Frappuccino was. And this woman looked me straight in the face and said, if you knew what was in it, you wouldn't drink it. And I know, because my husband works for the FDA. These people don't care about they don't care about your environment. That's not what they're there for. And when
all
people
they care
talk
about their money.
That's right, their money. And, the other thing about it is when people talk about national security, let me tell you what national security is. It's elitist security. It protects them from us. And that's all it's for. That's all it's for.
Pay the Dragon Slayer. That's all it is. Military industrialized complex is out of control.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I don't have anything else to add. We went over like we normally do, and Dave is always so gracious about it. Are there any closing comments that you would like to make, Kevin and Andrew?
Yeah, I just want to say one quick thing. Thanks for you guys for having me, but there's a way we can fight back. We have to fight back with knowledge, and not in a radical way, and just spin everything into your own dogma. Like I said, come out of your dogma, Snuggie. Open up your mind, and fight this in a logical way and inform yourself in an intelligent way. Make up your own mind on things. And, this Fukushima's out of control. Yeah. And they're not going to control it. And the radiation, we can't fix any of it. What we can fix is ourselves. What we can fix is we live like you have cancer before you get it. With your diet, your spirituality, your faith. That's your only hope. And teach your kids how to do it.
And you said something something interesting to me earlier on the phone today, Kevin. You said, history is going to look back on this. And I said, yes, but we have to survive it first. That is the first order of the day, is to survive what they're doing. And the only way we can do that is to stop it. It has to stop.
You look at me, my intensity on the YouTube site, using the fuck every other word and my language going crazy. That's why, because the art has to match the events. And it has been about survival. And the knowledge, screaming and yelling, everybody should have been screaming with their hair on fire from day one, just like I was. I look back on it, I did it exactly the way it needed to be done. And it is about survival. Absolutely, in a very acute, intense way. And history will look back and say, whoa, why wasn't everybody screaming their head off like this maniac? Because we are on survival mode and we need to survive. And we need to teach our children to adapt and how to survive. And we need to make these assholes pay. And not just the people that did it to us, the black and yellow journalistic whores in media who covered it up. And trust me, I've got a list. And I've kept a list. Sanjay Gupta's on top of the list. I have the list, every one of these people. I've ate, slept, drank this since the day it happened. And I know who they are. And we have it. And we know who they are. And they're going to pay.
I'll tell you, my will to survive is just as deep as yours. Just for that reason, I want to see them pay for what they've done.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Cursed spite that we were born to set this right. It's Shakespearean. It's biblical. Yeah, and we need to do our part, and it's to look back at it as the warriors that we need to be.
Yeah. Before I let you go, Kevin, you did post something about being in Diablo Canyon on February 14th. Now, that's near San Luis Obispo.
Valentine's Day, yeah.
Yes, and that's such a beautiful place. My God, it's beautiful. And I want to let people know that you're going to be there because I would like to see more people meet you there. And I mentioned this before, and I thought, I hope he doesn't think that's cold. But one of the reasons you're so valuable to the movement is because you can travel and be one of those people, and not all of us can do that. But people who can should. Just like
I have an activist who pays for my travel. Lonnie Clark in Oregon, Eugene, and she doesn't have money. She pays for all my trips. Buys the plane flights and the hotel. It's her and I. That's it. I don't have any other funding. I don't have an income. She pays for it, and she doesn't have money. It's me and her doing this, and I've traveled all over, and I'll be at San Luis Obispo, which Diablo Canyon, the most dangerous active reactor on the face of the earth. We're going to protest it. We'll be on the pier at Avia Pier, and we'll go from there. And, people need to show up, and I call it the Post-Ignorance Project. And we're calling attention to where these reactors are, who they are, and where they are. And, we know who they are, we know where they are, and we know who's orchestrating, and we just want to call attention to people, so people, wow, I live right by that thing. Yeah, dig into them in your local community and find out about them and go to work on shutting them down.
Yes, like yesterday. That's right. That's right. Do you have any closing remarks you would like to make, Andrew?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for having me on, and thank you, Kevin, for you and Miss Milky and Christina for inspiring me. So I'm really grateful for the knowledge you have imparted to me. So I think a lot of people, people I know on an intuitive level that things are very bad, but they're not willing to come out. And people just gotta understand that they have skin in the game. I have two young boys, and my youngest son, he's 8, and he still wants to be slept with at night. And when I sleep beside him, it's like, I don't know how I can explain what kind of world this is right now. When he gets a bit older, it's just too scary, and that's what motivates me. And I grew up loving America and Japan from afar, and I got to live in Japan, and I watched American sitcoms and movies, and I thought that is an amazing country. It's just it has its problems, and it's in its past, but I'd be much happier if Japan and America were sort of rescued from the powers that be that control them. In Australia as well, we have our bad leaders as well. So moving forward, that's what we're all here for a better world for our children. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I've been raising a child in the middle of this, and I can't even tell you how horrific it is to not be able to look at him with a straight face and tell him I know he has a future, on top of telling him you can't eat that, it's radioactive. I mean, my God, that's awful. But I want the both of you to know, as well as Christina, even though she wasn't here, that you are my heroes. And there just aren't words to express how much I appreciate what you folks do, and because it's so needed out here. So I really appreciate you being with us and helping us to get the message out, because people are ready for the first time in a very long time. They're ready to hear it, and it's good to know there are people out there that will give them what they want, which is the truth. So, God bless you both. I appreciate what you do, and you really are my heroes, so thank you.
Oh, so much.
Thank you, and lovely to meet you.
I can tell you that.
I second that.
All right.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
Thanks, Mhairead.
So hang in there. We'll talk
our
again.
Pleasure. Absolutely.
We'll talk again, definitely.
All right. Good night, you guys, and good night, Mhairead. And it was a pleasure to have you here with me this evening. And I thanks for getting up the wee Scotland hours. I don't know if it's the wee hours of the evening or the morning.
Great show. Great show.
Thanks, James.
The people in the chat room,
James, thank you very much.
the people in the chat room are just absolutely with all of you.
I hope so, because we need it, because I tell you, we are all going to hang separately, or we are all going to fight together and win, and that's the only way.
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, and thanks again, Dave. You're just so gracious. You're an excellent host, and I'm very grateful that we're here, so thank you.
I am honored that you and James and that lady over there in Scotland who's got the name that I keep mispronouncing, named MacDonald at the end. Mhairead and Cindy.
Mhairead. Phonetically, it's M-Y-R-E-D. Mhairead.
Mhairead. Well, Miss MacDonald, you know who I'm talking about.
No, it's okay. I have to give lessons on how to pronounce my name. Don't worry about it.
All right, Dave. As always, if you could send me the MP3 file of this so we can get it out to our counterparts to get it out on YouTube, that would be much appreciated.
If you would give me about 10 minutes, honey, I'll do that for you.
You got it. Thank you very much. Thank you again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I hope we can get together soon. So, thank you.
Are we still live?
Thank you for listening to Wolf Spirit Radio. We are a dedicated group of individuals bringing unique programs, ideas, concepts to our shows. We invite you all to explore the programming and shows here on Wolf Spirit Radio, Sunday through Saturday, 7 days a week. You'll find inspiration, information, and entertainment. And join the chat rooms, too. Connect with other listeners as well as the host right here on wolfspiritradio.com.